And good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening on this rotating globe, which is in a little bit of need of help this evening, this morning, or this afternoon. In case you haven't noticed, there's some things going on planet Earth, and we're going to be talking about them this evening with my special guest, Sean Stone. Now, Sean, besides having a very famous name, has made a reputation for himself in several different venues investigating things that we call conspiracies. How did that word ever get this bizarre, strange connotation? Is it true that the CIA years ago, when conspiracy was beginning to kind of percolate through the culture, decided to create this diversion by making any theory that is not politically correct or they don't think should be followed up on, etc.? Did they all decide somewhere in some secret meeting it was going to be called a conspiracy model? Is that a conspiracy? Anyway, we're going to kind of go through some of this tonight. What I want to do before we get into the heart of the program is to talk to you about a couple of important and positive developments. According to Dr. Anthony Fauci, who, of course, is the international expert from the National Health Institutes regarding this pandemic. He used to be at the CDC. He has become a leading authority on these kind of outbreaks going back decades. He is basically saying that we're not, this is the good news, that we're not on the same coronavirus trajectory as Italy. And it will be important and very interesting, of course, to see if his prediction is grounded in fact, because if you look at the curves, they look awfully similar so far. In another bit of good news, item number 2, and if you want to see where these stories are, let me tell you again how to get there. You go to our URL, theothersideofmidnight.com. That's where you can find us on the internet worldwide. I think we're in 190 some countries. If you look at our little spinning globe tonight, you'll see little blinking dots of light, listeners in cities all over the world, which is good because we need to get the word out on a whole bunch of stuff. And the fact that our program is, shall we say, increasing in listener capacity is a very interesting development. In fact, last night we had such an assault of listeners that at some times Robert thought that maybe we were under attack, because we've been under consistent attack, but there are ways algorithmically to tell the difference, they tell me. So last night we had a major spike in new audience members. So now what you guys need to do, if you're listening, is join Club 19.5. The only way this show is supported is through that incredibly modest subscription price in Club 19.5. So if you want to keep this information on the air, if you want to keep us coming into your self-isolation or quarantine locations, gosh, all the new language we have to learn, then I would strongly advise a membership in Club 19.5. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of past programming to go through. You will not run out, and it's all kinds of interesting, shall we say, developments over the last several years that you're going to want to track. So by all means, you definitely want to do that. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to go to theothersideofmidnight.com, click on tonight's banner, which says New World Order, my guest at the top, Sean Stone, and just scroll down on that page, or you can hit what we call the fast links, which are right under the banner there, right under my little pricey summary of tonight's show. Hit Richer. That will take you to the first items. Item number 1 is the news story on Anthony Fauci saying that this site might actually, thank God, not be as severe as Italy. Item number 2 right under it, there's a Nobel laureate, and let me get you his proper name because this is important. There's a Nobel laureate who won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. His name was Michael Levitt. He's a Stanford biophysicist who began analyzing the COVID cases worldwide in January. He correctly calculated and predicted that China would get through the worst of its coronavirus outbreak long before many other health experts began to see similar trends. He is now foreseeing a similar outcome in the United States and the rest of the world, and you might want to read that. He says we need to control the panic in the grand scheme. This is a direct quote. He says, we are going to be fine. Item number 3. Go back to Radio with Pictures. Number 3. This drug that we've been talking about for the last several days, chloroquine, which was developed back in 1945 by the U.S. Army to fight malaria and has been used in a number of other situations to fight drugs which are not parasites, which are not spores, which are not fungi, but which in fact are viruses. It turns out in a number of trials, they're not very large as yet, but the consistency is very reassuring. Chloroquine actually seems to have 2 effects. One is if you get COVID-19, it will really help ameliorate the symptoms. It kills the virus. It basically short circuits its replication mechanism inside the body, so we are told. And if you're in bed with this darn thing, it will significantly shorten the time that you're in bed. If you're in that damaging age group, that senior age group, where the fatality rate goes up dramatically, I mean really dramatically, it seems to have very efficacious effects there. But even more interesting, at least for me, because of the panic that's circulating well beyond the scope of this disease, it seems to have a prophylactic effect, which means if you take, a few milligrams, and the dosage is going to be part of the prescription you get from your doctor, you only have to take it a couple times a week, and then you wait. And it's not something you want to take consistently every day, high doses. It has very negative effects if you take too many grams of this stuff, so that's contraindicated. But in moderate amounts, in the appropriate dosages, it appears to really have a positive impact. And I want to say that up front because people are really needing hope in this rather desperate time, and this is something which gives us real solid hope. I'm looking down, and I think Cynthia has posted something else in my item. So I'm going to save item number 4 for later in the program when Georgia joins us. But item number 5, we love rescue stories. And the question is why? Well, what I have in number 5 is an incredible rescue story, which I think is emblematic of what's going on all around the country during this potential crisis. For those of you who were not alive during the flight of Apollo 13, who weren't even born during the time of Apollo was the national program to take men and women to the moon, actually just men, and bring them home again before the Russians, before the Soviets. We had all kinds of very successful missions, and one that really stood out as a bizarre mission where, unless everything had gone correctly, it could have ended in horrible tragedy. And what I want you to do is I want you to go to the link, and I want you to do some Googling on Apollo 13, which will tell you the entire story. We don't have time tonight. But the emblematic part of the Apollo 13 mission was, even though NASA does innumerable simulations and tests, they had never simulated key aspects of the Apollo 13 mission, which, if they had not been solved, these problems would have killed the crew. They would have died of carbon dioxide poisoning. They would have literally gone to sleep in a cabin increasingly filled with CO2, and they would have never woken up. To counteract that, they needed to make modifications to the onboard carbon dioxide mechanisms, which basically encapsulated it and kept it away from the rest of the atmosphere. And to do that, they had to do mechanical things. They had to make systems between the lunar module and the Apollo command module compatible. And they wound up using things like scissors, mission briefing documents, flight plans, the kind of stiff exterior cardboard that these came mounted in, duct tape, and plastic hose from some of their spare supplies on board. And they created a do-it-yourself. Oh, yes, also there was a sock involved. Forgot about that. Thank you. They created a do-it-yourself system to keep themselves alive. What's the analogy? What's going on all over the country right now, because it turns out that our incredibly sophisticated technological manufacturing infrastructure is not up to producing simple masks and gowns and face shields to protect hospital workers from being exposed to the virus. I mean, that sounds incredible. If you wrote that in a script, no Hollywood, film company would accept it, because that's absurd. This is the United States. It turns out we have farmed out all of this manufacturing of basic, crucial stuff to the rest of the world, among other places, ironically, to China. And they're not exactly in a position right now to meet the industrial demands of billions of these articles: gloves, face masks, visors, gowns, whatever. So what hospitals have have turned to is they've basically gone back to the Apollo 13 model. They are asking a variety of individual citizens and companies like garment companies, dressmakers, whatever, to, in lieu of what they're doing, in lieu of manufacturing or creating more product to eventually sell when this economic crisis passes, they're asking them to turn to a la World War II and basically make gowns and masks and gloves and PPEs, personal protection equipment, all that stuff. And they're doing it. And so what a lot of people see as a detriment, the fact that we were not prepared, the fact that a lot of people are looking to the dark side of this, oh my God, we're not prepared. What I'm seeing is the flip side, which is that people, ordinary people, are turning to in droves all over the country, in fact, all over the world. And they're doing what they can to step up and to contribute in this crisis. And it's bringing us, if not physically, certainly spiritually and in terms of consciousness, closer together, because we're all in this together. And the watchword is, as Ben Franklin said many, many, many decades ago, if we don't all hang together, we are going to hang separately. Oh, by the way, it's the 50th anniversary of Apollo 13. So I thought that was kind of intriguing, that this is coming full circle, and the ingenuity of the American experience is in full measure, in full view. So I'm kind of one of those guys tonight who I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, the story seems to be that the glass is half full. It's not just half empty. With that, let me turn to my guest this morning, Sean Stone. You probably don't need me to really introduce you to who Sean Stone is, because he's the son of a very famous movie director. The interesting thing is that Sean has developed his own investigative profile, his own contacts, his own outlets, his own media. He worked with the former governor of the state of Wisconsin, I believe, on a television show having to do with political and economic conspiracies. For several years, I'm not sure, we'll find out whether he still has it, but he had his own show as co-host of a show on RT that Robin would not miss a single, edition of. It was called Watching the Hawks, which I thought was a kind of a cute and clever title. And they covered an awful lot of very interesting stuff. So without further ado, let me bring on Sean Stone. You are on the other side of midnight. Welcome. Mr. Stone, are you there? I'm not hearing anything. That's very curious. Very curious indeed. Okay. Keith, of course, as you know, is our IT expert. Can we find out why we're not hearing Stone? And he was here a moment ago. Okay, maybe he's not connected. Let me go back and see. Oh, he dropped. Isn't that interesting? Okay, thank you. This is live radio, folks. I suspected something like this might happen tonight. Okay. One ringy dingy. Remember, what was Lily Tomlin? That was her name. She had this incredible stand-up routine in Las Vegas, and she played a telephone operator. Okay, we're calling Sean. All right, we're gonna try a backup here, because obviously it's not working on Skype. So let me try one more time. And
there he is.
Mr. Stone.
Hello.
Hello. Are you on Skype or on the phone?
On the phone, on Skype.
Oh, okay. Because I guess for some reason it dropped. I gave you a totally inadequate introduction because, frankly, I know almost nothing about your extraordinary life. So let's start at the beginning. You're the kid of a very famous guy. How did that affect you growing up? Did that really impact your idea that the world is not as simple as most of us think?
That's one way to put it.
Well,
I mean, I can't speak for anyone else's reality, but I can speak to the idea that, yes, I mean, I grew up with a lot of, let's say, the privilege of education and alternative education at the same time. So at one level, I was able to be exposed to projects like JFK, right, at 7 years old, and, the untold history of the United States, given books by William Blum about the CIA's black operations as a kid, understanding in high school already that there was a deep state, essentially, alternative to what people believe when they watch the news and they think the president makes every decision and Congress, the congressional bills are written by upstanding gentlemen in Congress, all this nonsense. So I had a sense that this was all off, that there was a deeper, darker side of American history, right? Particularly the CIA and other organizations that operate, let's say, outside off book and outside of most mainstream media. So it's understanding that I sort of delving into the secret history of books by Jim Marrs, for example, and David Icke, really going into the farther realms, the farther reaches of our own understanding and beyond. Obviously, as you know, what is out there outside of our realm of perceiving, what is beyond this third dimensional reality. So that was that began from my father, but I would say I went beyond him.
Well, the old cliche, you can lead a horse to water. In other words, there had to be something in you that resonated with this, right?
Well, sure. There's something in me that is non-human, that began long before the human story, and is aching to remember and to understand what that is, because I think if we're honest with ourselves, we know that we're more than this 3D reality, and most people are just scared of admitting it publicly.
So how did this, being exposed to the film JFK at 7 must have had a seminal effect on you. I mean, it had a seminal effect on the rest of the planet, so it certainly you couldn't have missed. How did it shape your education, the things you wanted to look into, the doors you wanted to crack open, the kind of in other words, how did it shape your life?
Totally transformed my life. It wasn't to say that, I've spent my entire life researching conspiracies or something, but as I said, I was in high school already intrigued by alternative history, by the secret histories that were unknown to most high school kids, right? That were not, talked about in normal history class, for example. And so I was one challenging and posing the questions and posing the things that were, outside of the norm.
Oh, you must have had fun in high school. Wow.
Not necessarily.
I'm being very, very, very facetious. Okay.
Yes, exactly. It was. I mean, look, there were good teachers and there were people that were responsive, but the truth was that it was isolating to understand the dark side.
Now, hang on. Let me ask this question: did you go to Hollywood High?
No, I went to Brentwood.
Okay, but it's the same kind of culture where it has nothing to do with the world, with history, with future, with past, with big. It's all about tiny. You must have really been isolated.
Isolated is one way to put it. I mean, I wasn't entirely isolated because I did have my father and I did have a good group of friends that I spent time with, but I really bonded a lot with my dad in high school. I was spent weekends with him and I really enjoyed that conversation. I think I was more mature than my years by the time I was 15, 16, and I was, going off. I went to Somalia at 16 in the summer to go work for Save the Children.
Oh, that's
in Somaliland. Cool. And I was working with another organization here in South Central and Watts and places like that the following year. I mean, I was interested in the world of adults. I was interested in, work and what's happening at the level of how do we change things for the better. And, I did have an idealism about me going into these things. And over time, it became more of a realism, understanding the NGOs and a lot of the system is designed, basically to perpetuate systems of, power, let's call it. The system of, call it the pyramid of power, right? The money ultimately goes back to the top into a smaller and smaller collective of hands. That's why our economic systems are so rigged in a sense that we see the 1,000 corporations or whatever it is that have almost half the world's wealth. It's insane.
Yep. So when did you figure out that you had talent to be an actor?
I don't know that I have talent to do anything. I just do what I like. You don't wait. You don't wait for people to tell you what you can do in life. You just do what you want to do.
Right.
And
if you're lousy, it's quickly going to come to
you can, right?
Yeah, but if you're lousy, it quickly comes to a bad end. So obviously you were not lousy. So when what was your first acting job?
I mean, to be honest, it was Salvador probably. I mean, the Wall Street. I had my first lines in Wall Street, and Gordon Gekko's son, Michael Douglas's son in that film, and I was 2 years old, and I was in JFK as Costner's kid, and then I didn't really like acting as a kid. I was more interested in writing and storytelling as more on the creative side of the writing side. But in my 20s, I did some acting. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an actor. I would say I act when I felt it was the right moment, kind of like Orson Welles or Shakespeare or something. It's like you act in here and there, but I don't consider myself a full-time actor.
Okay. So would it be accurate to describe you as an investigative journalist?
Not at all. That's the last thing I am.
Okay.
I've never been a journalist. I've interviewed a lot of people over the years, but I interviewed them as a host and sort of interested in different stories, and including your story. You're someone that I would have interviewed if I still had my Buzzsaw show going. But no, I'm not a journalist. I'm not an actor. I'm more of a, how would you say?
That's what I'm asking.
A Renaissance man. I mean, no.
Oh, so you're a generalist.
I'm a generalist.
This is a show. This is a family of generalists. We have all kinds of interesting generalists who gather here. Okay, so you're a generalist. So when did you? I mean, the shows you just mentioned, Buzzsaw, and the one that Robin loved, which was your Watching the Hawks. How did that come about?
Conspiracy theory. I did the show with Jesse Ventura, the third season, with Tyrell and Jesse. Tyrell's Jesse's son, and Tyrell and I hit it off, and we were sort of co-hosting that season. And we had a great time in covering secrets around time travel, reptilian agenda, Skinwalker Ranch, things like that. And so we carried it on with Buzzsaw, basically, and that became an interview program. I did hundreds of episodes, really interesting characters that I interviewed over the years. And that became Watching the Hawks, which was on RT with Tyrell and myself. And that was more socio-political, whereas Buzzsaw was more, the outer limits.
Okay, let me ask you this question. This is going to put you on the spot. I want to warn you. How come you guys never asked about what NASA's hiding in the solar system?
Well, what you mean on conspiracy theory or on Buzzsaw or on what? Any
of them. Nobody called me.
Well, I didn't produce conspiracy theory with Jesse Ventura. So if I had, obviously, I would have had a lot more say. As I said, I've wanted to interview you and talk about the Mars mysteries for a long time. And I don't know why. Just sometimes you don't have the connection, the one person that's going to connect you. And as it now stands, I don't have Buzzsaw as a show. So I was excited when I heard that you wanted to interview me on your show, because I'm really interested to talk with you about Mars and the ancient history there.
You should have listened to last night's show. In fact, you can listen to all the archives, because we've done an awful lot of stuff on this show regarding that research that is probably not generally widespread in the mainstream. It will be, but it's not there yet. So, in fact, an aspect of tonight's discussion does involve, for me, an extraterrestrial set of possibilities, because I'm looking at what's going on the planet right now, and I'm looking at all the conspiracy theories, and I'm thinking none of them are as big as what we're seeing going on. And that leaves only one thing left, which is this is not being modulated by terrestrial power centers. This is something, I believe, bigger. What do you think?
Yes.
Oh,
now we're starting to speak my language. I only look at things from, again, non-3D perspectives. When I look at events, when I look at major demarcations, you start to see the synchronicities appearing. You start to see the prophecies coming into fulfillment. You have to recognize an agenda, not just an agenda, a script that's been written in the consciousness of existence long before we incarnated into this human form. And so it's not necessarily, when we talk about alien and not alien, it's like, I am alien. I know my soul is not from here. I don't know maybe there are some humans that are purely earthborn or that don't have souls that go back to the stars, but I think a lot of us do. So a lot of us understand the alien thing, and it's not as weird as people
Is
want
it the alien thing, or is it the ET thing? Because for me, there's a major difference.
Of course. I mean, multidimensional is the way to look at it. A lot of these beings, multidimensional, not necessarily, yes, extraterrestrial. But again, I think that we began in the stars. I don't think that we're earthborn, as they say. We're not entirely earthborn.
Okay, I think I could kind of get behind that. We are actually coming up to a break here, so why don't we take a pause? My guest this morning is Sean Stone. We're talking about how do you look at the world. Sean, with an incredible opportunity, had a front row seat for, shall we say, developments that are not exactly linear. They're not exactly the way you would think of them. You're on the other side of midnight. When we come back, we're going to talk specifics, including, is this whole coronavirus thing not really from here at all? My name is Richard C. Hoagland. We shall return.
theothersideofmidnight.com. Talk radio with pictures on demand. Liberate your hyperdimensional time scale and non-linearly access over 400 hours of conversation at the cutting edge of science and thought. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive content that fits your interests and time schedule. Filter episodes by guest or subject. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Talk radio with pictures on demand. theothersideofmidnight.com.
And welcome back, everyone. Sorry about the little hiccup. There are little things called switches. Wow. None never told me. Good morning once again. My guest this morning is Sean Stone. We're talking about the C word, conspiracies. And before we get, Sean, to this whole coronavirus thing, which frankly reeks of some kind of conspiracy, meaning it's not accidental, it's not from nature, it's not from bats, it's something much more intriguing, if you want to use that term. Let's talk about what was the first big conspiracy that you kind of wrapped your head around and you felt you could contribute toward?
And I thought I could contribute.
Meaning investigated, found a piece of data that other people had missed, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, again, I mean, I never considered myself an investigative journalist, so it wasn't so much as what I contributed as much as actually, no, that's not necessarily true. There was something I didn't even think about. What got me into a lot of the supernatural stuff was, I love David Icke's work since 17. I think I read Biggest Secret, and I was always fascinated by the multidimensional side of things, right? Like what is really happening with this shape-shifting, the reptilian agenda, that concept, right? The idea that there's alien reptilians and other species, greys, mantoids, all these other species that are here. But it was like there was a soul resonance in me that remembered something and connected to these things. Well, along my travels after college, having studied and read, I ended up experiencing the paranormal and the supernatural firsthand. And that became my first film that I directed, and it was called Greystone Park. And it came out in 2012, but it was sort of amidst the found footage craze, if you recall, when they had all those silly films like Paranormal Activities 16 or whatever coming out. And it was sort of ignored because, Greystone was a true story of what we did experience as we were going into these haunted places, these haunted mental hospitals. Greystone is a very famous haunted mental hospital in Jersey. It was operational for almost 100 years. Thousands of bodies were buried there. People had experienced all kinds of torture, extreme experiences of pressure baths and electroshock and lobotomy. And what we found was exploring these places was how much of a portal they had become, these mental hospitals, where the patients had maybe brought their own shadows and traumas and entities, from the lower astral realms, as they say, into the place, and all of a sudden it became like a portal to the dark side. And so you'd find a lot of evidence of Satanists that would go there and worship and use these buildings as feasting grounds or something, for their rituals.
So did you do on-camera stuff and EVP and magnetometers and all that to kind of chase who might still be haunting this facility?
No, we didn't even need to because, it's something you can feel. I saw possession, people just getting overtaken by a spirit, and just their shape, their face, everything, their whole expression, their demeanor, the behavior shifts just like that. It was really fascinating. We got a lot of stuff on camera. I mean, ultimately, there's a documentary that I still haven't put out that actually has the real experiences, but Greystone was a fictionalized version. But there are some real things in Greystone because we did shoot in some of the real places. And we got a lot on camera from, even though we were fictionalizing it to make it dramatic, dramatize the experience, and try to explain to people how the paranormal phenomenon, the supernatural phenomenon, can't just be considered. It's not about EVPs. It's not about something external. It's an internal thing, because as you go into fear,
what do you mean internal?
Internal in the sense that there is no external reality. So it's like as you go into fear, the dark places of your own mind, the dark thoughts, the dark energies within you resonate with the outer experience. And so it goes hand in hand. It's like a mirror. It's a reflection, right? And so this place, in a sense, it's like the more you go into fear, the more it manifests dark energy, and things happen. It becomes like a storm of darkness. And that's what
So you're saying it's more like a resonance thing?
Yeah, it's a resonance, precisely.
So when Art Bell, of course you know him, used to have those people on that would do these magnetic recordings, the EVP, what are they recording? Are they recording the observer's own mind imprinting on the tape, that kind of thing?
I mean, if you're saying like they're capturing something on camera?
Yeah.
No, it's not to say that.
And sound.
That, right, but what I'm getting at is that the resonance that it's almost like electricity, right? What frequency are we resonating at?
So, okay, let me try to understand this.
Right?
Are you saying that if you have the wrong consciousness and you go into one of these environments where there's been unimaginable suffering and horror and human tragedy, that literally, if you're of the wrong mindset, can open a door, a portal, and similar resonant consciousness comes through because you're the one opening the door?
In a sense, yeah. In a sense. That's one way to put it. Yeah, and that's why it's so important to go in these places with, I found, with faith, I really found the purity of faith and intention by being challenged by the darkness of it, by the fear engendered by these places, by, as you say, the suffering. Suffering and sorrow creates a lot of low feeling, right? Low feeling of depression, of anxiety, of aggression, anger, hatred. So the idea is to raise your frequency and come with love and blessing, and all of a sudden it does, I find, change. You can change. You can bless a place. You can change the resonance of a place that's been contaminated.
This is really intriguing, and I'll get to why I think it's intriguing in a moment. But let me just kind of continue trying to understand this. You're not saying that real dark entities, consciousness does not exist. You're saying that they can't get in unless we're predisposed to allow them to resonate with those dark energies. Am I right?
Sure. Yeah, in a sense. I mean, the microcosm, macrocosm concept. It's like we are a reflection of the world around us, right? And so we all have the darker emotions. We all have the lower frequencies. But the question is, how much do we work through to clear them? How much do we work through to release them, to rise? The alchemical journey, I believe, is to clear out and to go through the dark night to then rise up into the light, essentially, right into your golden nature.
See, I expected, John, to have some ahas as we had this conversation this morning. But you've given me an incredible one right at the top of the show. Because if you stand back, let's say about 250,000 miles, and look at the Earth from the moon, with what's going on this planet tonight, which is that everybody is being panicked and driven to inchoate fear on a planetary scale, is something wicked trying to come through?
Io Pan. Pan was the god of, the ancient chaos a little bit. He was a trickster, mischief god, right? Peter Pan was modeled on him. Aleister Crowley was worshipped, Pan. He wrote a poem to Pan, Io Pan. Pandemonium, pandemic, panic all comes from him.
How interesting. All right, so we're looking at a big, big, big planetary agenda. Now, the other missing piece, if these were normal times, Sean, this probably wouldn't work. But we're not in normal times. In the models that I've been working on, if you followed my work, there's this physics, and it's cyclical. It changes over time. It changes with the yuga cycles, with the precessional cycle. That's how it's modulated. And we've been saying for years that we're coming up to the time when we're going to have that nodal point in the physics we hadn't had for 25,920 years, to be precise. And this is a window when something or someone is trying to change the future for the worse. And this whole thing looks to me, we're going to bring on our resident metaphysician, Georgia Lambert, in the third hour. She worked with Manly Hall and many other interesting folks. It's looking to me like this is the big, how do we get them? And, of course, the antidote is all that positive stuff that people are exemplifying where they don't want to be got. Yes, they're afraid, but they're turning their fear into active things they can do in terms of supporting people, the weaker among us, those that are more sensitive, more fragile, that are looking for needs to, in other words, the sense of humanity rising to help each other, I think, is equally as strong as the fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the
love
good news.
Prevails.
Yeah.
Love prevails.
Well, it should. In every script it should. But as McCoy said to Spock one night, he said, I have found, Mr. Spock, that good only wins if it's very, very careful. Remember that line?
Well, I wasn't a Trekkie, but
I'll
take your word for it. No, but Love Prevails. I mean, it's the theme of the book I just put out, an Audible book called Desiderata, and it's about that exact journey of separation, the fear, the loneliness, the anger, all the different emotions that we go through in our search for love, and ultimately, we are here on a journey where we've forgotten our true selves, our true souls, but I don't take these shadows to heart. I don't take the darkness to heart. That's the thing. You can't, the shadows, I believe, the dark is always there to help us, to challenge us, to rise, to become the light. You see, that's what the darkness is here for. It's necessary as part of this earthbound journey that we've chosen to experience. We're here to be challenged. We're here to, yes, face our fears and recognize ultimately that they are our own shadows. So are those things out there? They're out there, but ultimately they're only really reflections of us, that which is within us. And when we're ready to really face ourselves and to embrace that which we maybe thought was separate from ourselves, we'll realize that there's only oneness.
So you use this facility. What was the name of it again?
Which one? Greystone?
Greystone. I should remember Greystone. It's a very famous fictional. I think it was the mansion of Bruce Wayne. I think.
No. It was, you're thinking of Grey Skull, maybe.
No.
Grey Skull was in He-Man, but Greystone, there was a manor, wasn't it? Greystone Manor or something.
Yeah,
but it wasn't. You know, Grayson, Dick Grayson. Well, listen, Greystone is a fascinating concept. It was in the Necronomicon as the location that the mad Arab stumbles upon.
Oh, Lovecraft.
The Greystone in Lovecraft, and he finds the Greystone, and the black magicians are doing magic, and they're conjuring a snake demon from the Greystone, and that's where he has his initiation into what is real in this world, which is magic and black magic, ancient gods, and things that we thought were, that we put that aside when we evolved our new form of science. But actually, science may have replaced religion, but it's equally as dangerous because if all these forms, religion or science, takes away that which is life is magical. Life is the miracle. Life is the thing that's in the moment that you can't turn into a prescription or a free pass or say we have the answers and we can control it. No, life is more spontaneous. It's like fire. You can't. You can have a certain understanding of it, but it always is going to surprise you. And I think that's where we're moving now in this new generation. I'm talking about the corona and stuff. I'm just worried about people believing science so readily because it's like the new priesthood. Oh, we don't know what the heck you're talking about. We don't know what, how to understand what a virus is. We don't understand the body at all. So let's just trust the scientist because he's obviously gone to school. The doctor's gone to school longer than I have, so he must know. And meanwhile, it's like this whole illusion.
Well, the question isn't
just like the priesthood.
It isn't what he knows; it's what he or she can tell us, because academia is full of do's and don'ts, and there's a lot of brave people that would like to write about the truth, and they look at their bank balance and they look at their tenure and they decide not to. I mean, to me, the scientific method is crucial, but you got to follow it, and following means you publish what you find. You don't decide, oh, that's not going to be good for my career.
Yes, that's certainly an aspect is the they say that the financial side of science, right? Who's underwriting these studies? Who, the whole peer-reviewed study process. Who's underwriting the universities? Well, we know this is the financial oligarchy that endows these universities and essentially steers them. The foundations steer them in directions they want them steered. We've seen that for well over 100 years, since the days of Darwin and a little bit before. But really, it's that mentality that. I would say even going back to the days of Robert Fludd, actually, probably in the 1600s, when Fludd was fascinated by hermetics, and alchemy and things like this. I mean, Newton was too, but that was never considered kosher, I guess, by the establishment, even though all the Masons and the people that were really running these scientific schools understood it. And that's the point. There's the esoteric side, which is not acceptable to.
Well,
they don't give the profane that knowledge.
Look at Queen Elizabeth. Her entire reign was founded on occult, magical power and technology. John Dee. Yeah. And the New Atlantis, and for Francis Drake, and I mean that was where this extraordinary experiment, the United States came from.
Mm-hmm. The New Atlantis.
Yeah. And that's why we're supposed to be the vehicle to carry people through the planet, through, I believe, what we're now in. Because this is a major, major moment in planetary history. This is not trivial. And I'm so tired of certain people, won't mention any names, your friends out there, but I'm so tired of them trivializing this because they're missing the awesome thing that's going on and how we, meaning people, have to take control of it and use it as an opportunity.
Well, what happened? I want to ask you the question a little bit. What happened on Mars, do you think? Because this is a similar moment. I mean, I've always seen America at the moment like Atlantis and like Mars, where we can implode, we can destroy ourselves, our ambitions can ultimately be hubris can be our undoing, right?
Yep. Well, the brief model is that many, many billions of years ago, someone came here and decided here'd be a great place to create a kind of a garden. And so they rearranged the planets of the solar system. Have you noticed, if you read any of the astronomical literature, that finally, after all these years of Copernicus and Galileo and everybody saying, oh, the Copernican principle, we're just average. No, the solar system, at least in this galaxy, is unique. We found nothing like it. And this is so affirming to my model, which says someone came here, they redesigned it so it would support life, our form of life, and then set the experiment loose, and all hell broke loose. And we're living now in the shadow of epical events 65, 66 million years ago, which changed the destiny of the entire solar system and intelligent consciousness within what used to be the garden. And in 65 million years, Sean, in my analysis, for some reason, it has not been fixed, meaning someone likes it the way it is, and they either are prohibiting it being fixed, or its involvement is part of the process of the academy, the school, the experiment, whatever, to find out what happens when consciousness goes really, really wrong in 3D.
Pretty bleak. I do agree that there was an intention to allow the fall. But it was, it's an experiment, as you say. Yes, consciousness going wrong, but also, the one thing that came through to me clearly was that, even without guidance, even without our gods, our angels, our supporters, in a sense, any guidance from beyond this dimension, humans have actually been pretty good. If you look at their heart and you look at how even when people do bad, they still justify it. Right? They still have to give a rational reason for why they do bad. It's rare to get the sociopath who just doesn't care, right? I mean, that's the fantasy. The serial killer who just has no reason. They're just crazy. Most people, when they do something, they have to justify it, which means there is a consciousness.
Well, I used to say that even Hitler, looking in the mirror in the morning, felt what he was doing was the right thing.
Right.
That's the problem.
Some conscience. Yeah, there's some heart. But there is something that's interesting, I think, in the experiment that's been run, is that they've been looking and they're going, well, even when we cut you guys off from any kind of guidance, you still have some level of conscience. You still have some heart. There's something, there is some sense of love in the human being that, the majority, at least, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but it seems to me that most people have love in them. And it's just been walled off by traumas after traumas after traumas. And, who knows, nuclear wars on Mars. I mean, getting destroyed by, star systems getting evaporated, people being, dispersed from planets. But the idea is that we've been traumatized even on this planet, right? Slavery and wars and famines and fears and scarcity. And so the trauma is in our systems. The issue now is working that out into a place of letting go of the trauma, coming into a new modality, a new realization that, wait a minute, the universe is infinite, which is we are allowed to have the abundance. We are allowed to be okay. We don't have to be in this system of slavery anymore, the system of scarcity and fear of resources, and that survival pattern of the animal is not ours anymore. We can step into the new human now. If we accept it, it's there. I believe we're at the old system is dying. There's a pause. This is a very necessary moment. A pause.
See, that's why
can we step into it?
This whole experience is so interesting, Sean, because it's almost, and we're going to talk a lot more about this in the third hour with Georgia, but it's almost like metaphysically we have been given an extraordinary opportunity to decide which road we want to continue going down.
Mm.
And there's all kinds of tools, provided you can lift the suppression of the technology, the real science, the real history, who we really are, the fact that you can create technologies that would make Arthur Clarke's, remember his whole line, any sufficiently advanced technologies indistinguishable from magic?
Yes.
We're dealing with magical technologies which can literally create matter and energy out of, well, it looks like in 3D out of nothing. It's not. It's really higher dimensional realities. But the point is, none of this is allowed to be used, and the planet is dying for a variety of reasons. And this may be the break point where these alternatives, including how we define a basic human life, is up for grabs. All new things can be moved into this because people are so desperate, they'll open their eyes and ears to anything that will give them realistic hope. Well, hopefully, that's a great time for the con artists and the hucksters to come in. But that's just noise. That's the usual stuff, okay? The real stuff will take precedence. For instance, we've been looking at resonance therapies, which literally can solve this virus problem just like that. Because there's a track record. It just has not been allowed to be published in any mainstream medical or academic journal. Doesn't mean it's not there. No, I'm very keen on the idea of light and sound. I think are the healing tools of the future. That's why, I say, forget about most doctors and scientists. What they're giving you is what they've learned, which is mechanistic approaches to the body. And there are good doctors and scientists, but I'm saying that the school system itself is so flawed. We're not at that level of recognizing, as you're saying, it's about resonance. It's about, look, the fact that they're rolling out 5G, this is terrifying to me that this is being done so brazenly. I think this has much more to do with the corona thing than people realize. I don't know what's your take on this, but the fifth generation of EMF tech, because
we're artificially altering the entire electromagnetic landscape of this planet. And the fact, they just announced FCC is going to approve another 1 million towers, 5G towers in America. They're launching satellites, but we're literally, we're irradiating the planet with these EMF frequencies that are, again, it's debatable how dangerous. But I can tell you one thing. I was told in the 90s as a kid, don't hold a cell phone to your head. And now people have forgotten that, and they've got it on their person at all times. And we're being doused at all moments with the Wi-Fi frequencies from our routers and every block, every school. It's insane.
Okay. So, that's the bad news. Okay. Let me tell you the good news.
Tell me.
Do you know a gal named Sherry Edwards?
I don't think so.
Okay. She's the pioneer in this whole resonance frequency bioacoustic sound therapy modality, and has astonishing positive developments going back decades. Decades. People who would be dead I've had on this show who are now living incredibly happy, productive lives because she saved them. She intervened, not with chemistry, not with drugs, but with tuned frequencies that basically supply the body with things that they are missing. Because ultimately, when you take a molecule, when you take a drug, it geometrically and resonantly interacts with your system. That's how it actually functions. It's ultimately all about frequency. And it was Tesla.
Right.
Why am I hearing somebody making a Ford Model T in the background?
We're building a car here.
Anyway, so that frequency idea is really a silver bullet because it's based on the model of how humans and life and organisms really interact with all kinds of other environmental factors in 3D. It's through this resonant.
Well, I want to try it.
Yeah, well, I will.
Where can we try it?
I will put you in touch with Sherry after the show. We'll exchange websites and contacts and all that. And we're working with a team of people who are using these modalities with patients in the field who, of course, are terrified. And they're having very positive results. I don't want to get ahead of the story, but they're having very positive results. You know what? We're at the top of the hour. God, this is going too quickly. Sean, hang right there, okay?
You got it.
Okay. My guest this morning is Sean Stone. If that name sounds a bit familiar, it's because Sean Stone is the son of the famous director Oliver Stone. But I've never heard Oliver Stone talk about reality like this. Hyperdimensional, multidimensional, extraterrestrial. We're kind of visitors here because we're on a journey of much broader and more intriguing dimensions. We will continue. You're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland, and we shall return.
There's a piece of sky money cannot buy, a different shade of blue. There's a plot of land not owned by any man, a mountain with a view.
TheOtherSideOfMidnight.com. Tune in to listen to Richard C. Hoagland and his fascinating guests. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive member benefits. Search the archives. Listen to past episodes anytime on any device. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Support the broadcast that provides you with the most interesting conversation available. Talk radio at the cutting edge of science and thought. TheOtherSideOfMidnight.com.
different shade of blue. A mountain with a view.
And welcome back, everyone, on this Sunday night, March 22nd. It is the equinox, the equinox weekend. I think the equinox technically was yesterday sometime, which means this is spring, equal night, equinox. Anyway, Sean, welcome back, and I'm really intrigued that you, at a very early age, apparently figured out that there's so much of a bigger reality in which we're immersed. And if you're putting soda in that drink, I would mute first.
Sorry.
Anyway, where do we want to go from here? I want to get into this book because, you know, the New World Order is a term that came to us from, I guess, the Bush years. But people don't seem to understand that it existed long before, you know, Bush kind of gave it words.
Prominence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get into that? Because your discovery of this guy, William Yandell Elliott, I find really intriguing.
Well, I can't take credit for discovering him. It was actually through the Executive Intelligence Review. I'm sure you know some of their writing.
Mm-hmm.
They've had some great journals over the years, and I read about Elliott through those channels. And I was just curious to know, who is this professor at Harvard who mentored Kissinger and Brzezinski and Sam Huntington, so many people that came through Harvard all through the from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And Elliott was just sort of this staple at Harvard in the political department. But beyond that, he was CIA, had an office of the CIA at the same time that he's teaching kids at Harvard, and he's connected to the Rockefeller Foundation, all that. He was probably the person that introduced Kissinger to the Rockefellers, to become an advisor there. And, I found him interesting because he was a disciple, really, of the Round Table schools, which were the British imperialist circles of the late 19th century.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Well, let's start there. Let's start there, because most people are not familiar with the Round Table. Most people, if you're millennials, there's a weird noise going on in the background. We can't have that. That's bad. Thank you. Most people are not familiar with the Brain Trust, the Brzezinskis and the Kissingers and all that. So start with the Round Table. What was the Round Table, and what are they up to now?
Well, I don't know what they're up to now. It's basically, you have to go back over 100 years. You have to go back to the late 19th century. Cecil Rhodes was the great imperialist of South Africa and Rhodesia. What becomes Zimbabwe was Rhodesia. It's a long story. I mean, he basically was there looking for creating diamond mines, and he was working on behalf of the Rothschild dynasty in England, and to create, found those countries of South Africa and Rhodesia. But ultimately, what's bigger is that his vision as an imperialist was to reincorporate America into the British Empire. And, he was one of the first people to talk about incorporating what is now Israel, the Holy Land, into the British Empire. He had this whole vision of renewed British imperialism, but it was transformed really in the early 20th century because of World War I. What happened was his disciples in what became the Round Table groups had an understanding that the British Empire couldn't last in its form at that time. Basically, it couldn't be the empire of personnel, kind of like America suffered in Vietnam, right? Like, we can't have troops on the ground all over the world enforcing the law. We have to basically create a soft empire, call it the Commonwealth, and start to join with America ideologically and through these education systems, bringing people over to study our tradition, call it the Rhodes Scholarship, for example, right? And that's how Elliott, who becomes the mentor of Kissinger and all these guys back in America, he goes and studies with these Round Table disciples and becomes a partisan to the ideology of the British Empire. And that's what we're living in. That's what people have to understand, is that we're living in a colonial world, even though we're supposed to be post-colonial, we're supposed to be free countries and all this. But we know at the end of the day that the economic systems that were created by imperialism and that whole stretch of history of hundreds of years of conquest, right, from Asia to the Americas to Africa, we're all living in the wake of that. Everything from the roads to, the roads at the best, that's the best aspect of it. You don't see that much of it in a lot of third world countries still. But the point is from the roads to really the idea of the corporate structures, the idea that, these nations are purely there, whether it's a South American country is only a banana republic or something, it's like they're only there to basically produce a resource to ship off to be refined in the first world, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's African diamonds, for example, being refined in Belgium, or all these are economic models of imperialism, because the imperialism of the British Empire was designed to extract the resource, right? To have an elite class of oligarchs in each country to rule, right? To extract as much as you can, and to then refine it and to make your profits as cheap as possible, but really to keep the power and the technology out of the hands of the producing countries, out of the hands of the third world countries, out of the hands. It's like the slavery of the South, right? It's like you basically you want people to be enslaved essentially to produce an unrefined material like cotton. It gets shipped to England. They refine it there in the factories. Mm-hmm. For the poor British workers at the time, they refine it. Then they ship it off to India for the clothing to India. The Indians buy it and they sell you tea or opium in exchange, right? And then you dump it to the Chinese and they give you silver for it. I mean, that's the sort of the free trade model that has never really left us, and that's why the world is the way it is. With most countries are terribly in debt in ways they'll never be able to get out of. And most countries are impoverished. I mean, we're looking at a world, as you know, that the technology that's available to us as humans is so far more advanced than what's been given to us because of an imperial modality of economics, of mindset, right, of legal structures. It's all designed.
Well, I have said on the show several times that I had an inside source tell me this was one of the deep state folks. He said, and this was several years ago when there were real concerns about nuclear terrorism and all that, he said that the power structure here, speaking just for the United States, would rather lose a major American city to nuclear terrorism than reveal this physics. Because, of course, the physics could stop that. This physics can stop all nuclear reactions.
And what's the physics?
Hyperdimensional torsion field physics. The same stuff that Tesla was talking about, the same stuff that there's a million videos on YouTube that show this, but they never gain traction because politically they are persona non grata. This cannot exist, therefore there's no other route than the accepted academic theory of the world, of science, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, precisely.
But see, I think that's going to break down of its own weight because, again, this virus has presented us with an extraordinary political opportunity, like in Sherry Edwards' work, to show that you don't need big pharma. For instance, we were talking on the show the other night. I said to Sherry, okay, so we're very concerned about 5G. What if 5G was hacked and all these positive frequencies were inserted in the system? So when you turn it on, it actually is helping as opposed to not helping? And she said, oh, what an interesting idea.
Right, why not?
I mean, why not?
Let's do it.
Remember the years of the so-called blue box?
No, what's that?
That was a hacking tool for the analog AT&T phone system. So a bunch of hackers got together. They created this little electronic gadget. You could take it into any phone booth anywhere in the world, play the tones, and get free phone calls anywhere in the world. It's called the Blue Box. And they were made illegal, and they were obviously bootlegged and all that, but it was a real technology. It really worked. And then I believe somebody wound up hiring the inventor because he was great, at keeping people from doing other kinds of hacking. So they I guess you'd say they bought him off, although I don't know the story in detail, so that's probably not a useful analogy.
Yeah, I don't know this. I didn't know that story at all.
So if we have to have 5G because of the bandwidth, I mean, there's a very interesting story going on around that I have not had time to check out, but it turns out that Wuhan was the place where 5G in China was first turned on, and the timing of it being turned on and the appearance there of this virus to be a little too coincidental. But again, how do you track the reality of these internet rumors?
Well, it's not the rumor. That's not a rumor. That's clear that there was Wuhan was the epicenter in China of 5G, and that was known. You really look at it. I mean, you think about the virus. Just think about it. Why a virus that's supposed to be this much based on person-to-person contact? Why isn't it spread all over India or Africa? I mean, that would be a place. India, you think, would be a major hub.
One would think.
This was spreading. But guess what? They don't have 5G in India. So it makes you wonder that there's a way. I mean, I don't understand exactly how this works. There's a great book called The Invisible Rainbow that people can read, and gets into the history of the relationship of how, when we've affected the electromagnetic fields of the planet, beginning with the creation of the light bulb and the actual electrification of Edison's electrification program. From that point forward, the flu pandemic began right after that. Then you look at the 1918 outbreak was right after the radio frequencies were created, so the wireless frequencies. So there's a whole history of pandemics.
Well, now wait. Let's not confuse correlation for causality. That's a major conspiracy theory fallacy. Because you need real data. You don't just need things popping up. You can have some possible other explanations. But if you find a direct connect, for instance, when this idea is proposed, since we now know, based on reputable research, several parts of the world, that this virus was manufactured. It did not come out of bats in the middle of nowhere through a wet market in Wuhan. This was manufactured. The only question is, who manufactured it? And there are folks that say the Chinese did. It got out of their level 4 lab, which just coincidentally is only 20 miles from downtown Wuhan. I find that intriguing. The other thing is the foreign secretary's spokesperson for China the other day, I forget his name, he said that we did it, that the U.S. Army did it, and basically, China, which of course is, war fighting words in any other time. There's another perspective, and that is, if this was seeded from upstairs by somebody, or even if it's a natural event, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. Does the name Chandra Wickramasinghe ring a bell with you?
No.
He's a big ET biology, virology guy in England at the University of Cardiff. He worked with Sir Fred Hoyle. They have actually conducted experiments, balloon experiments, where they're finding that we're being inundated with living organisms, microorganisms from outer space all the time. I forget how many, there's a study out now, how many billion microorganisms fall on every square meter of the planet over the course of a year. Where do they come from?
Well, I'm assuming from comets and things like this that are strafing our atmosphere.
Yeah, but behind that is, where do they really come from? Are they natural organisms, or are they part of this epic of extraordinarily advanced solar system occupation by our great-great-great-great-grandmothers, and then something awful happened? And are they the result of the awful thing? In other words, are we being well, this is Wickramasinghe's model, except he thinks it's all natural. He's not, at least I don't think yet until I get to talk to him, because I've only talked to him about this over the last 3 days. He's published 4 papers, and I'm trying to get him on the show in the next 3 weeks to talk about his model, because he says on October 11th, there was a tremendous bolide that entered the atmosphere of China from the solar system and exploded. and that the time for materials to get down from the stratosphere to the surface of the planet, given the size particles you get when these things blow up, is about 2 months, which of course is the time frame from when this bolide appeared, not far from Wuhan, to when the first virus appeared was about 2 months, first case. And then we have periodic appearances around the world. He has shown in a map, as one of these papers, that there's a band between 30 and 50 north where this virus appears to be overwhelmingly concentrated. That's like a band where atmospheric circulation would have spread these particles in this model. Now, again, in my version of this was not accidental. This was not just a random nature act of nature. This was an act of war by somebody upstairs that wants to change the planet fundamentally.
You're saying from where did it come, though? You're saying from a different planet. It was sent here from. It
was sent here, and I think. Are you aware of the concept of the so-called breakaway civilizations of Richard Dolan?
I just lost you there. The breakaway civilization, yes. Of
Richard Dolan.
Well, I mean, he amongst others, I've heard of the breakaway civilization. I don't know where they located it. You know, is it in Antarctica? Is it in Antarctica?
No. It's off planet. It's not here. You know, it's the old 800-pound gorilla story. Where does the 800-pound gorilla want to sleep? Anywhere it wants to. At the end of the war, according to this model, the Germans took their advanced anti-gravity technology and a whole bunch of other stuff, and they left the planet. They obviously went to the moon. They went to Mars. They have colonies. They've had 70 years now to look back fondly at the Earth, and basically, since they're Nazis, they want to own it. They want to run it. They want it to be theirs. This virus fits that model in who does it attack first?
Are you saying China?
No, who? Not the country. The who? The people. The so-called useless eaters. The seniors are 1,000 times more likely to die of this thing than younger people. And young people, really young people, like kids, they're not affected at all. And yet, at both ends of the spectrum, the immune system is undeveloped, right? So you'd expect an opportunistic virus to really attack kids, would you not?
Well, that's exactly. It's designed to keep the starseeds alive and get rid of the, as you say, those that are not. Maybe they're not upgraded. Maybe they haven't been upgraded properly by the whole hybrid concept. You know, the hybrid aliens and those that are young that are sort of, you know, more hybrids, and then the new mutants, I guess you'd say, and then there's the older version of human that's no longer going to fit for this planet.
Someone's sending me a note and I don't understand it. What's a BAU or a BOU? I don't.
The bolide that you were saying that was like that came from outer space.
Oh, bolide, BOLIDE, is a big, huge, bright meteor. That's our producer, Cynthia. Yeah, I thought everybody knew.
I want to throw out a question to what you're saying, Richard.
Oh, by all means. Go ahead.
So let's say it's the guys upstairs. I mean, this virus, maybe they're like a gardener. You know, maybe it's not a declaration of war because, exactly, it's not taking out the young people. Maybe it's taking out the old people who are holding the old paradigm in place.
That's awful. That's awful. Cynthia, that's awful.
No, wait a second. Maybe it's really not that powerful, but only those who are already have their systems so weakened, which are the elderly, because they have all these other illnesses going on, they're the ones that fall to it.
Well, just to reinforce her point, I mean, I don't see this thing as particularly dangerous. I think this is where the hysteria comes in. I mean, you look at the actual fatality rate, and I mean, it's probably somewhere in the range of 2-3%. I don't see this as being something so devastating if it was engineered to wipe out some great number of the population, as Gates has talked about. We need to get rid of a third of the planet or something, 2/3 of the planet for population control. This is not the virus to do it at all. So it feels almost more to me like well, again, I mean, look, you dismiss the idea of the electromagnetic frequency, but it's true. You can look at the relationship of these rollouts, and whenever we affect the EMF frequency, it does lead to pandemics because we are.
Wait. You say I dismissed? No, I'm asking questions because just this correlation, I'm looking for the physics of how it would work, given that we are living on a planet which is inundated in electromagnetics. Think of the Schumann resonance. Think of auroras.
Precisely.
Think of. Go ahead.
Precisely. In fact, influenza was originally called the influence. It's called influence from the stars. And it was oftentimes they were studying it because influenza is not transmitted from person to person. In fact, the test that they've done, they did a study in Boston, I think it was years ago, and they gave it to 100 people, and they couldn't find any connection between passing it from person to person. Influenza was always considered more of based on solar activity, flares, and that kind of electromagnetic relationship from the sun and from the stars. So the idea of the electrification of the earth and how when we create artificial EMF fields, we are affecting our bodies. And so whether it leads to depleted immune systems, it affects our nervous system. I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening in conjunction with these EMF changes whenever you're affecting the rollout. You're rolling out satellites, for example, radar systems historically. There's a great book I'm saying to look at, Invisible Rainbow, gets into these correlations. And it does make the whole point that there's a fascinating correlation between pandemics and rollouts. And
but again, is there laboratory science showing that when you expose biology to these frequencies, viruses and new parasites suddenly spring into being?
I don't know about
That's what I'm looking for. I
regard.
like real science. I love science.
Well, but the problem is, what is real science? I can show you a live science article that says this disease absolutely could not have been made by humans, and it was absolutely made by nature, and that's based on scientific studies that have been done. So, who do you believe?
Yeah, but I've got other papers showing. Well, look, they're.
That's the point.
No. It's not a matter of belief. It's a matter of empiricism. There are doctors in Thailand. They were the first guys to do this. In desperation, looking for treatments for patients, they turned to a series of anti-HIV drugs, and they found they worked. Now, they can't work unless there's an HIV component in the genome of this little virus, right?
I've heard that from John Rappaport talked about that.
That is empirical data. That's not theory. That's real data. You give this stuff to patients, they get better. You don't give it to patients, they die. So that's science I trust. Empiricism, laboratory, experiment, not theory, experiment. I want to see a series of experiments showing, because I can show you experimental data from the torsion work, the Russians, for instance. It may not be the electromagnetics directly. It may be the fact that along with every electromagnetic emission or absorption, there's an equivalent torsion response. Since life itself is based in the torsion field, not the EM. The EM derives from the field, which is the ether, okay? It may be there's a two-step involved here. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying just correlation is not good enough to convince people you got to convince to change a whole lifestyle like this 5G thing.
Well, the 5G thing, I mean, I think that there's much more in terms of the evidence showing the dangers of EMF radiation.
Well, remember the birds over Astronom that all fell out of the sky when they turned it on?
And that's
a clue.
So, well, there you go. So when it comes to this 5G rollout, what I'm saying is I think that it's a very handy way of covering up a 5G rollout if you have a disease, a pandemic sprouting up where people can say, oh, they got sick. And if it wasn't from corona, people might be suspecting, hey, wait a minute, the 5G tower just went up and I just got sick for a month, which I've heard, but again, it's like, well, you can't prove that. You also can't sue the telecom company. So what are you going to, how, this is a very tricky game. And I would urge you to interview experts. I know some people, if you want, they can talk about 5G and get to detail much better than I can. Obviously, I'm not an expert in any capacity, but having heard the arguments about the dangers of EMF.
Yeah, no, we've done a couple of shows. We're going to do many more.
I'm worried, right, that we're being blanketed for no reason. I just understand the reasoning behind what is the necessity of being blanketed by 5G tech, satellites.
That's easy. That's really easy. It's simple. It's called bandwidth. If you have more and more customers, 7 billion people, and you're wiring the world, you need the bandwidth. The lower frequencies don't have as much bandwidth for, Netflix as higher frequencies. So it's basically the consumer demanding more stuff from the internet and from their phones.
I think that's a complete cover story. I mean, right now... It's
not a cover story. Why would it be a cover story?
Because in America, we have the ability we don't need to stream faster. That's such nonsense. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're jeopardizing health by putting cell towers on every block and in schools and in you're expanding the amount of basically the actual cell tower locations to every block, and jeopardize people's health because they need to get a few seconds fast. I don't understand that. I mean, we literally have streaming devices across America that are all working just fine on LTE devices, and 4G. So why do we need to go to 5G?
Well, this is why I'm going to do more programs on 5G, because to me it's always been simply a matter of economics. They do it because customers want, they want incredible fast download speeds because we have no patience anymore. One of the things
I disagree. I think,
You disagree? Okay, go ahead.
No, I think that's exactly, to me, there's an insanity to the idea that we have to basically become blanketed by these cell towers. You understand? Like the idea that we need it faster. I don't think anyone has ever complained about the speed of downloading and watching stuff on Netflix when we had 4G, and we had it until a few months ago, right? It was never that. That was not the issue from customers. I just don't, especially in America. I mean, you're talking about like bringing it to like Bali or India or something like that. I mean, I've been to those places. It was never an issue with 4G. So the idea that it has to be faster, I don't buy that argument. To put out 1 million new towers, to put out satellites, to turn every cell phone into a satellite phone, to basically put thousands of satellites into the skies to blanket our planet. This is a very dangerous issue, and it's why we have to look at the EMF spectrum and how it affects the human body. You understand? Because I know you're aware of this stuff, but I'm getting at the idea that why are we being blanketed by this electricity that is artificially created? What Tesla was getting at, I believe, was different. What Tesla was getting at was he was trying to harness the power, the energy that exists within the earth, within Schumann resonance, within the sky, within the human body. Right? What we're creating is artificial electricity that's going to affect the Schumann resonance. It's going to affect the flight patterns of birds. It's going to affect the human body, and potentially for the worst. I'm very concerned that we're not really analyzing this and studying this in a healthy way, and we're just kind of taking it for granted that it's okay to just put up thousands of new satellites and 1 million new cell phone towers and put them in schools. And even though, as I said, when I was a kid, everyone understood a cell phone at your head was like carrying a microwave. Now you're blanketing everything with these microwave radiations that are 60 millihertz and millimeter wavelength. I mean, it's very frightening to me, and it's taken for granted, even though we know that we are electrical beings. That's why we do EKGs and things like this. We are full of electricity. So now we're just going to change the entire electromagnetic frequency of the entire planet and not expect that it's going to damage.
Okay, hold it there. We're at the bottom of the hour. Don't want to damage any planets here. My guest this morning is Sean Stone. We're talking about conspiracies, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the 5G. And then I want to kind of bring, maybe in another 20 minutes, we'll bring some other folks on who have some very interesting opinions. You're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland. We shall return.
theothersideofmidnight.com. Tune in to listen to Richard C. Hogland and his fascinating guests. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive member benefits. Listen to past episodes anytime on any device. Search the archives of over 180 episodes. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Support the broadcasters to provide you with the most interesting conversation available. Talk radio at the cutting edge of science and thought. theothersideofmidnight.com.
And welcome back, everyone, on this Sunday night, March 22nd, 2020, the spring equinox weekend. Welcome to spring. What a spring it is. My guest this morning is Sean Stone. We're kicking around a whole bunch of ideas. Kintia, why don't you come back on and talk to us for a moment? Because I had someone yesterday after you did the show last night. They sent me this beautiful email, and they said, oh, Kintia has this incredible radio voice. Have her say more. So I'm responding to audience requests. Talk about the 5G in Wuhan. Kintia? Hello?
Unmute, Kintia.
For how many times we have done this, the whole concept, Sean, of muting and unmuting seems to be the major hang-up in Skype. So,
who's Kintia?
Kintia is our producer. She's also been a partner with me on the Mars Odyssey for decades. She created the first three-dimensional sculptures of the two images of the face on Mars and proved unequivocally through analog techniques that it was in fact made by somebody. It had all the appurtenances of a statue. And then later when Mark Carlotto did the first digital three-dimensional transforms from the Viking data, his digital model matched her model beautifully, perfectly. But she was first. Anyway, apparently she's having some kind of a communications issue, so I guess she can't join us. She said to me in the chat.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. You didn't hear us talking about you for 5 full minutes? Oh, my God.
I'm sorry. Barbara Honegger was calling me to to have me share with you that she had a conversation with Mr. X, and she wants to participate in the conversation briefly later on in the show.
Okay, so we'll add her in the third hour.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that you had a question for me.
Yeah, I'll talk about, first of all, did you hear the first part where I said that I got a letter last night after your show saying, oh, you've got to have Kintia come on the air much more. She has this gorgeous voice for radio.
Right.
I'm serious. I'll send you the email. Anyway, so talk about 5G in Wuhan.
Oh, me?
Yeah. You, yes.
Yeah, I was listening to Mads Pausvig, and he was talking about how they got it under control by importing huge doses of vitamin C and turning off the 5G. And the book that Sean is telling you about, The Invisible Rainbow, is the book that Annette and I have been mentioning to you because of all those corollaries. And it is full of data. You'll love it. Data.
Yes, I love data. See, again, Sean, these correlations are important, but, all you need to do is to take 5G into a lab, take some viruses, take some sampled mice, whatever, and see what happens. You don't have to live in the never, never land of the internet, you can find these things out.
Well, if you recall that the studies they did on the EMF frequencies with just not even 5G, just lower, just other bandwidths, going back to I can't remember which generation it was, but they did test and they did prove that mice developed tumors. But then, the FCC just wrote that off and said, well, they're mice, they're not humans.
Well, no, wait. I know about the Harvard experiment with the tails. Did you ever hear about that one?
I'm not sure.
They exposed mice at Harvard, the same Skinner folks that were doing a bunch of other stuff, to fluorescent lights 24/7, and their tails dropped off.
So that's bizarre.
Well, because you have unique frequencies in a fluorescent, good old mercury fluorescent lamp, which are incredibly non-natural. And we're looking at these systems that are non-natural, whereas electromagnetic frequencies are part of the resonant cavity of the Earth. Thunderstorms give us all kinds of radio frequencies that are resonating, the Schumann resonance and the high, harmonics and all that. So it's got to be something in addition to just EM. There's got to be another triggering thing, and that's the science which no one wants to publish because they're forbidden from publishing.
Yes, there is that aspect too. But again, this goes to the question of what I'm getting at, which is I think that there is a problem that we face when it comes to how we approach science. And it's like saying, well, yes, there is natural EM, there is natural radio waves, there is electricity, right? That's what Tesla was trying to get at. He was trying to figure out how to harness the electricity that already exists within the Earth, it's like being able to broadcast that electricity that already exists there, right? Trying to understand the electricity that already exists within the human body,
right?
The electricity in the sky. That's different than artificially creating it. And then the question of when you artificially create it, what is the dosage level? Because when you start to take these towers, essentially, right? These central, you start to create the tower and move that into a smaller miniaturized tower, which is what the fifth generation is about. And being able to put that on every block, you understand, next to your, next to schools, next to your apartment building. It's
even ordinary cell phone towers is not a good idea.
Right. So I'm saying, but the intensity is transformed. So you're bringing it now to that micro level. So it's like they're basically broadcasting it. That's what I'm saying. They're building 1 million towers across the United States. It's literally all over the place. Every block you're going to see it. Every lamppost is going to be a tower on it.
Okay. Let me ask.
That's what I'm saying. It's too much. There's dosages.
I agree. It's too much, but we have to be able. We have to be able to prove it's too much, and that's back to scientific experiment. All right. I mean, fault the base.
That's not my job. I'll tell you what. I'll get you a great guest who will get into this with you, and she'll explain exactly the dangers of EMF.
Super, fantastic.
But I'm not an expert on this. All I'm telling you is that I'm just using reason and logic and saying, look, there's something that is going on here that I intuitively can tell you is off, and I do believe that this is affecting us in a way that's, maybe harmful. Maybe long term we'll adjust to it, as we have over time. We've adjusted to the idea is that every time that we've had these transformations of the EMF spectrum in our reality and radio wave spectrum by the inventions, we have adapted. That's true. We have. Maybe we will adapt to the 5G. Maybe that's maybe that's the next evolution of us. I don't know. All I'm saying is that right now I do worry about the harm.
Rich, can I intervene here?
Yeah, this is Keith Morgan, who's our IT expert. Keith, welcome to the other side.
Hi, Sean. I worked for ABC News for 30 years. I was working with all kinds of microwave transmissions and things like that. We had classes on microwave transmissions, et cetera. But there's two versions of 5G. One is in the megahertz range, and the other one's in the gigahertz range. And
just hang on. Just to be clear, megahertz used to be the band of good old UHF television.
Yeah, actually, it's that's the VHF high frequency stuff. Gigahertz, we're now into the microwave range, which we use for satellite uplinks, things like that, and communications that we use to transmit radio and TV stuff between remote locations. and that flies around through buildings and things like that. But that was still in the lower 2 to 3 gigahertz range. And we started moving into 5 gigahertz, which is a much quieter frequency, which we use for RF for Wi-Fi. But when you have a megahertz frequency, that's a more natural one that we've been using the whole time, and we've never had any problems. What 5G really is the higher bandwidth to be able to send more data. So we're supposed to be able to do like 2 gigabits per second over 5G. But you can do it in the megahertz range, and you don't have to get into gigahertz range. And just because you increase the bandwidth to 2 gigabits per second, that does not change the frequency that you're actually transmitting on, and that's what really affects everybody. Okay, so you can have 5G in the megahertz range, which is going to let it go further, penetrate buildings and things like that, whereas you get into the higher frequencies in the gigahertz, it acts more like light. So it's going to get blocked and not go through buildings and go long distances as it would in the lower frequencies. So higher frequencies, I'd say stay out of that range, because you're right. We don't know what's happening as we get into these higher frequency ranges, and we know what microwaves do when you cook your egg in your microwave oven. So stay in the lower frequencies. Just come up with the proper modulations to get us the 2 gigabits per second transmissions, so we can do this large streaming and everything that I like to do. But stay in the lower frequencies. And since we opened up all that bandwidth when we did go to digital television, okay, we opened up a lot of spectrum that they're using for other things now. So we can still stay in the lower frequencies and still achieve what we want to do with the higher bandwidth to transmit data and not affect people by going into these other ranges that we don't need to get into.
Right. Well, that makes sense. And that's my concern, though, is that is there a darker side to this that is not being exposed? And that's the fact that we're not even having the conversation, right, about as you're saying, the 2 different versions of 5G. The fact you can't even have this conversation, you get called a conspiracy theorist, indicates to me that there is a darker side. Because then if it was open and it was transparent, then we'd have the debate and say, oh, yeah, no, we understand. Like, we're not going to go into the gigahertz. We're going to stay with we're saying megahertz, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
which is a factor of 1,000 difference in frequency. I mean, these aren't trivial changes. And see, again, qualitatively, Sean, there's something going on here. I agree with you. Quantitatively, I'd love to see experimental data. For instance, we have a friend who's been on the show a couple of times, Beverly Rubik. She's there in the Bay Area. She actually does experiments, and she's tested some things for us, so-called energized water and all that, and she's got real data. So I would like to, see what she's come up with, because she's very concerned about 5G. So, yeah, by all means, if you have any experts, any folks that you think we ought to bring on to talk about this in a rational, scientific way, as opposed to, just fear porn, I'd be totally open.
Oh, of course. And I'm like, look, I'm not someone that says, let's go back to living in caves. That's not my modality.
Did not get that impression, okay?
I'm just someone that wants to, obviously, wants to advance humanity, but in the healthiest way possible. That to me is a blending of science and nature, right? Being able to be in tune as much as possible, in harmony with our surroundings, and understanding nature as a model for us to imitate or replicate or draw upon, as opposed to completely transform, which is, to me, there's the dark side. That's the partly maybe the transhuman agenda that I'm sure you've discussed before on the show, but the transhuman idea that we're going to merge humans into robots, essentially more and more robotic, and the chipping of the human, the augment, being able to transfer memory. Transfer memories from our brains to.
Why don't you take a drink of water? Take a long drink of water.
Preston Nichols wrote a book called The Montauk Project, And in his book, he was telling how they were doing experiments on Montauk with radar frequencies. And they discovered that as they altered the radar frequencies, they got different results with the people in the town, nearby towns. They knew they could alter moods and make people become kind of agitated or violent and things like that based on what frequencies they were playing with. And they were actually using the town as guinea pigs to play with these frequencies and see what kind of results they got out of the people. They had animals encroaching on the towns when they had certain frequencies going. They had people rioting and having, altercations and things when they had other frequencies going, and they were playing with this stuff. So, we are influenced by these electromagnetic energies around us, and we just don't know. We're still playing with this stuff.
Precisely.
Okay,
we
guys.
are. I think that there's the higher levels that understand obviously and are playing with us, right, in this process, and that's the danger. That's the danger.
Let me go back to your book, the New World Order book, because if we are dealing with a planetary plot, it's got a number of different players. It appears to me now that maybe the Chinese are moving into the ecological position that the Round Table and the British in the 19th century were lovingly thinking about. But the Chinese are doing an awful lot of work in the third world. They're funding an awful lot of projects. I think they even call it the New Silk Road or something. And during this current crisis, and I believe Tim is going to be talking about this when he comes on in the next few minutes, there's been some evidence that China has economically moved quietly to take over a lot of these economically distressed companies that are going to be belly up because of the forced quarantines and forced shutdown of economies all over the globe. I mean, how could they have set that up and know what would happen unless they didn't and they're being opportunistic?
I mean, look, the New World Order book was set, it was history. It wasn't predicting the future. The future to me is there's so many things up in the air right now, right? I mean, we're at this moment that's unprecedented in our history as far as let's say in our lifetime. Not since World War II have we seen a total shutdown of economies this way and borders, rationing and that kind of thing, the deployment of troops. I mean, everything that we're seeing as far as the pause, the collapse, obviously Wall Street and the stock markets, everything that's paused, it's very difficult to know what the future is going to hold now, how it's going to shift the consciousness. I look very much with optimism to, as I said before, the birth of a new earth from the beings that are realizing maybe we were playing in a game of slavery and systemic control that was not human. And it's time for us to start to, as conscious beings, to find community again, to start to break out of these old habits. I mean, I love the fact that we're realizing we don't have to be in these big cities to work from home. I mean, I would love to see these cities start to empty out because they're just so overcrowded. We can get back in touch with nature, get back to the countryside, get back to, human interaction that's actually human, and not just predicated in social popularity or, making money or whatever, just losing ourselves because we're exhausted, run down by a system that just drains us. There's something that's happening in the consciousness. So to speak of what's going to come, I can't say. I mean, the Illuminati level of power that we're talking about that actually is, to me, extra dimensional, that we're talking, when we talk Illuminati, it's like we're talking about the aliens. We're talking about the things that are not from this world, that have been here and remember much more than we ever do because we incarnate, we lose our memories, right? And that level is playing a certain game with humanity. But at the same time, it's always been a challenge for humanity to say, wake up. At what moment will you as humans realize that you are not 3D animals, but you are fifth dimensional and beyond, intergalactic star travelers, and you are here as a soul on this cosmic epic journey, and this is your reality to take and to manifest and to take hold of. And I think that's where we're entering. I really do. I believe we're entering the age of Aquarius, which is the transition. We're just at the beginning of it, but it's a transition out of these dark ages we've lived in for at least 13,000 years since the last great floods, and who knows? I mean, you can go back.
Which, by the way, is half a processional cycle away. Okay, let me ask you this: a play forecaster. If this pause, this planetary global pause, is going to have a positive outcome, how would you envision it evolving, unfolding? What would be your best scenario for a soft landing, as some folks might say?
The best scenario is that Trump uses executive powers to start issuing arrests of a lot of these human traffickers and cartel characters that have been involved with the dark side of narcotics, the drugs, human slavery, sex trafficking, arms dealing, terrorism, this whole
Okay, let me stop you there.
Apparatus. Yeah.
I've heard this for 3 years. I see zero evidence that he's done anything in this direction. Why?
Well, all I'm saying is when there's a virus, it's a wonderful time to get rid of certain people, isn't it? It's an opportune time. That's all I'm saying.
So you're not talking arrest, you're talking assassination.
I'm saying you could do both. I've seen arrests in California. I've seen it reported in the news last week. A couple hundred people connected to cartels were rounded up last week here in San Francisco area. But the point is that if you really want to crack down on some bad guys, let's say in the cabal, now's a wonderful time. It's a wonderful opportunity. You have all the emergency powers you need to do it. So that would be one aspect of what I would like to see happen. I would like to see a restructuring of our entire economic system. I would like to see the burgeoning, basically, of the rebirth, let's say, of our not only our infrastructure, but using advanced technologies, like you've talked about here. I mean, going beyond what we know from the oil, the old petrodollar economy, like moving out of that, shifting into new high-tech industries and enterprises to rebuild America's infrastructure and go beyond, obviously, high-speed rail systems and new power sources, new ways of connecting, building cities that are for the future, for the 21st century, not dilapidated relics from the 19th century. I would love to see, as communities, we're connecting and realizing that art is actually the most effective economy of all, much more than war. When we do art, we tell stories, we build, we employ thousands, if not millions of people in the process of art to create things, to bring people together and realize our commonality and share in storytelling and share in our humanity, as opposed to riling each other up to hate each other and find reasons for fighting. I mean, this is where I see the future going.
And you think this planetary pause, I mean, how do you see politically that other set of agendas getting into a political general public consciousness mindset to where they move in that direction? Giving them models, giving them examples?
There are examples, but I think all it takes is a recognition of humanity. See, in the moments like this, when we pause and we really connect, I think we find what we're here to do, which is we're here to be human. We're here to engage as humans, and we've been so dehumanized by systems of corporations controlling media, education, governments. I mean, you name it. Everything is corporate. There's no personality. There's no soul. There's just contracts. It's a con. There's no human being. There's no human being at Starbucks. There's no human beings at Apple. There's no human beings in the government. It's just purely it's an apparatus, the system. And so I think the moments like this, where it's like, wait a minute, maybe some things are going to start collapsing, so that we can realize, well, we're humans. We can build. We can connect as humans. We can co-create not as these faceless masks of corporations seeking more and more power and control, enslaving half the planet, if not more.
Well, I'm a kind of, how do we get from here to there?
But you're too logical.
Oh, thank you.
A moment of revelation is all it takes, man. A moment of revelation and realizing what is essential in life. right?
You remind me.
Life is all that is essential.
You remind me of one of those early Star Trek episodes where, again, Spock and McCoy are on this little exploratory ship, and they're stranded on a planet, and Spock is trying everything, and finally they try to get off the planet, and they're going to wind up re-entering the atmosphere unless the Enterprise can beam them on board before they die in re-entry. And Spock does something totally, wildly, totally illogical. And after they're saved, McCoy turns to him and says, Mr. Spock, he said, why did you, what caused you to do that incredible emotional thing, that outburst? And Spock says, raising one eyebrow, Doctor, logically, it seemed appropriate to do an illogical emotional thing.
All right. So Spock, I'm going to call you Spock from now on.
Oh, so right on, John. I have to tell you, I'm doing that over here.
I'm glad you're all having fun.
Oh.
By the way, I want to mention that on your item, Sean, number 2, I added your short film Singularity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's about this situation right now.
That's what you're doing here.
Singularity was a short film about a plague that kills millions of people, so the AI takes over. We basically give the AI power to discern everything, surveil everyone to determine if they're infected, and then when they're infected, they get taken away. But it obviously leads to a debate, Do we know if this virus is real, the plague is real, or is it just the means of total big brother control? And either way, humanity dies because the AI has taken over.
Well, that's a positive outlook.
This is a warning. That's all. Just a warning. I did it 12 years ago. That was a different time in my life when I was more haunted, I guess. Well, honestly, 12 years ago, we were dying. We did get taken over by the AI, but that's why I believe that it's coming back. I think humanity is coming back. We're making a comeback in the 2020s, all right?
You've had your revelation, Sean. You stop being logical.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I let go of the logic. I was really logical in the 2000s. I was logical. Now I'm just human and just.
So you logically felt it was time for an emotional outburst. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My guests this morning are, let's start with the Distap side. Cynthia, our producer, who's making some very interesting comments and contributions this morning. Keith Morgan, our IT expert, former ABC employee and technician and expert in electronics, who worked with Ted Koppel for many, many decades. And last but not least, Sean Oliver, who I look forward to for talking to a long time. We have some invisible people that we're going to bring on stage in the next hour. You're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland. Don't touch that dial. The most intriguing stuff is yet to come.
theothersideofmidnight.com. Tune in to listen to Richard C. Hoagland and his fascinating guests. Support the broadcast and don't miss another groundbreaking conversation. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive member benefits. Listen to past episodes anytime on any device. Search the archives of over 180 episodes. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Talk radio at the cutting edge of science and thought. TheOtherSideOfMidnight.com.
And welcome back, everyone, on this Sunday night, March 22nd. We have been joined, I believe, by Georgia and by Tim. Tim Saunders, are you there?
Morning. How are you?
Good morning. Georgia, are you there?
I am.
Excellent. Okay. Georgia is our resident metaphysician, and Tim is our resident yacht designer. Now, you might be asking folks around the world, why does a radio show need a yacht designer? The answer is we're going to the moon. And that's a very long story, and we'll do that in another show. So, guys, you've been listening to the show. Let's, since Tim was on and Georgia just joined us. Tim, what are your thoughts on what you've been hearing this morning?
Well, I've been very happily listening, and I'm absolutely fascinated what you and Sean have been talking about. But I think it's time to up the volume a little bit and to throw a few pigeons amongst the cats.
Okay. Pigeon away.
So, I think obviously the world is starting to come to terms with what's happening. I don't think many people fully understand what's happening, but I'm starting to see a trend of people sending each other messages of, this conspiracy theory, that conspiracy, that theory, this must be correct. And then we come down to, well, who actually really knows 100% of anything? But at this stage, I think it's pretty wise to go on instinct, intuition, go on what feels right until it's proven wrong, because I'm not saying that we're making sort of binding decisions forever, but at the same time, I'm not really buying into what is going on TV 24/7 at the moment. I think there's a whole other set of strategies going on behind the scenes, which may be coincidental, which may have been strategically planned in the first place. And I guess history will tell the truth. I say history when we actually get the chance to look back at it. So
yeah, but isn't history written by the victors? So if the bad guys win, we'll never know.
Well, that's why we have the opportunity to write the history, Richard. Because I don't know about you, but I don't think I'm going to give up to a virus at the moment. I've been in Italy for most of this year. I left around 17 days ago. I have not dropped dead. I do not believe I brought an ill end to anybody else around me. What's quite interesting is that while we're all being quite devastated by what we see on TV, I've been in contact with people through my network from China, Singapore, Turkey, Italy, France, Monaco, Switzerland, Holland, Sweden, UK, and now Florida, where I am. And I've been asking people in some of these most inflicted areas in China and also in Italy, I said, how many people, with great respect, how many people do you know in your circle of friends or family who have actually died or know of somebody who's actually died due to the virus? Now, strangely enough, the number that comes back from China correlates directly with the number that comes back from a conversation I had with somebody in Italy. Any guess what that number is?
Don't know.
0. So, why all the hype?
So wait. Are you saying that no one has died and this whole thing is simply a fiction of mass media?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm not denying there is a virus. I'm not denying there is...
But how do we know there's a virus? Through the media.
Well, because people are watching the media and social media. What I'm saying is that ground truth in all of those countries I just listed, it'd be boring to name them again, I'm asking the simple question, how many people do you know have actually died? Can you validate? Can you confirm? Have you seen? And always the first answers that come back are, well, I've seen it on the news. Look at these statistics. Look at this. I've seen the army trucks coming past with, the supposedly bodies inside. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm not saying there is nobody dying. I'm just saying, isn't it strange that when I asked that question to somebody who is in northeast China, okay, not in Wuhan, but northeast of Wuhan, and they are affiliated with one of the biggest, I'm not going to say directly because I want to protect their identity, but one of the biggest, let's say, factories in that area. And, there's like sort of several thousand people, 5,000-6,000 people or something, and this person would know of any casualties or losses. And I said, how many people do you actually know who passed away? And the person said, well, actually 0, but I think maybe one, somebody knows of one, I don't know, a friend of a friend or something, one person. So it's somewhere between 0 and 1.
But see, what you're implying is Sean, this makes every conspiracy we've ever looked at pale by comparison.
Not necessarily, but
no, it doesn't.
Go ahead.
If you're claiming thousands of deaths planetary-wide and it's not really happening above the normal statistics, that's a major global planetary conspiracy, which I think would rank up there among every one we've ever looked at.
Well, it's a global 9/11, isn't it?
That's one way of looking at it, okay. So you're saying there's a huge disparity between the reports and the actual data.
I cannot prove this, but I am somebody who can talk directly with real human beings, offering ground truth in a handful, not a huge collection of countries, but let's say a large number of countries, including 2 of the most inflicted countries. Yes. So again, it's not a census of 100 people. It is not a proper survey. I don't claim to be, my data is to change the world. But all I'm just saying is I find it very curious. I would have expected somebody to say, yes, well, unfortunately, in my village, my grandmother or my friend's grandmother, unfortunately passed away or something like this. Right. I would expect stories like that. I don't want to hear it, but, that's what I would expect. But I didn't hear it. So, I can't bring any more truth to this, and I can't prove this anymore at this stage. But what I'm just saying is I'm open to the possibility that there's something else going on here. And what could that be? Well, I was listening to Dutch.
Okay, Tim, just hang on a second, because remember Marza Miller that we had a couple of weeks ago, who's working with patients with Sherry's frequency technique and a number of other modalities?
Yes. She
sent me an email tonight that I want to read because, again, every time I'm wondering what's going on, guys, I get emails like this. This is someone that Marza has known for a long time. Says, guys, this is real. Their lungs go completely white on imaging. This is a nurse. In just days. In 1 week, we've nearly run out of ventilators. Young people, early 40s, go from fine to saturating in 70s on room air. Have many on non-breathers maxed out, hoping they don't get worse. Trying Zithro and Plaquenil combo. All in question. It's an overwhelming, huge inflammatory response to the virus in the lungs. in an ideal situation, we give an antiviral and something like a steroid so the autoimmune response doesn't get out of control. But without a good antiviral, there's a hesitation to shut down the body's immune system. The immune system in this case is both the enemy and the ally. Thought for why this isn't as bad for kids is that they have better innate and worse adaptive immunity, and adults have better adaptive with weaker innate immunity. But the way this is hitting healthy 40-year-olds is unpredictable. Word is IL-6 inhibitors may be given a shot soon. The kinks are nowhere near worked out on how to respond to all this. We are overwhelmed with admissions and overnight management, and nursing is totally strapped. Testing is too slow, under-resourced, and PPE is short. We've never seen anything like this before. That's a person who's in the middle of the fight on the front lines who says that this is very real.
And she's in Italy?
I think she's in the States. Marza could tell us. I think she may be in New York. Yeah, Queens, New York, March 22nd, 2020.
Okay, well, like I said, I am trying to say this in the most respectful way possible, and I'm not trying to say I know everything that everybody else doesn't. I'm just saying that when I talk to people in a large collection of countries, including Italy, including China, then I was very surprised by the response. Now, you can say 2 data points is not enough to create a trend, but it is certainly enough to catch my curiosity. And then, as I said just before you read out that letter, which sounds very convincing, that email, excuse me.
Well, again, it's from people that we know, from people, that kind of thing. So we've kind of got a paper trail.
Well, true, but you know me, and I've just flown from Italy. So, I mean, I'm also somebody real with an opinion, Richard. So I'm just trying to share what I've seen. I'm not, as I say, I'm not trying to turn the world on its head. I'm just trying to say, are we all buying into this being as bad as it is? I mean, I'm looking around me. I'm seeing, beaches closed, restaurants closed, and small businesses closed. The whole country is being shut down. Now, I'm listening to, let's just pause it. I'm not saying, I know the answer to everything. Let's just pause it a second. Let's look at some of the possible underlying strategies, or let's say other things that could be going on. Maybe call them conspiracy theories, you can call them what you like. But, I was quite surprised to hear the British government make their press conference just over a week ago, the first one. And so this is post-Brexit. And this is, the Prime Minister that's not all that experienced, but I mean, he seems to have gained control of the government. And
you're talking about Boris Johnson, of course.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, and he has a fair amount of confidence because he has a large majority. And he started out, sounding like, don't worry, we're going to stand by you, we're going to look after you, we're going to, help you, we're going to support you, we're going to aid you, and so on and so on and so on. And then when you actually come down to it, it actually ends up being, we are selling you a shitload of loans. Excuse me to swear, but it is a huge sales pitch to bail out businesses which have been closed down, told to stop trading. Everybody has to lock down, so obviously business has to stop trading.
Right.
And then people are being enticed to take a £5 million loan, a £1 million loan, whatever it is. And, they're enticing because they are perhaps an escape route from a population of people who are quite frightened. Naturally, if you watch CNN or BBC every day, then you have every right to be frightened. But, when you come down to it, these loans are actually going to sign a promise to, a whole generation to pay back. So, does the money actually exist? Will the government bank actually? No, listen.
No, it can be printed. We know that.
Back up their loans with gold. No, they're going to virtually put a number into your bank account. Then you promise to pay it back over the next, 20 years, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, whatever it is.
Right.
And with interest. So the government basically is going to ride on all of that income from the population working to serve to pay back these loans. So in my opinion, it's a sort of a perfect storm and a silver bullet to kickstart a global reboot of the financial system. So again, I could be completely and absolutely wrong. I could be misguided by my two data points, these China and Italy. But still, virus or no virus, this is going on. It's not just the UK it's happening. Other countries are doing something similar. So these loans, I think, are one means of, let's say, a large organization, such as the government, trying to take advantage of this situation. So then what else do we have? Any more pigeons amongst the cats? We have the mandatory
hang on a second. I want, Sean, if it's true that we're losing you at the bottom of the hour, I definitely want to give you time to kind of sum up some thoughts, but I'd like you to respond to what Tim is saying, because in your experience, have you encountered people who directly know folks who have died from this? Did we lose Sean? There you are.
No, I'm here. I don't know directly. Have I heard? No. On the other hand, I don't know that there's a need to create a fake virus. It's already such a mild virus as it is. It's like it's like I said before. You're looking at 1-2%.
No, wait. You guys
rate.
keep saying it's mild.
I don't know.
According to the epidemiology I've seen, it's going to kill if we infect half the country. Let's assume that half the country gets it and half doesn't. Of the seniors, 2 million people will die. I don't think that's mild. That's the number of people who die in the country annually.
If you're talking about, that's still about 2%, 2-3%. If you're talking, well, it depends on. If you're talking about half the country, you're talking about half of 360 million people. So that's still like 2%, and that's. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but the ordinary flu is like 0.1%. Yes.
No, it's just the ordinary flu actually doesn't affect seniors for the most part. It usually affects people that are in their prime, like 20 to 40s is actually the peak ages for flu, or 20 to 50. So seniors don't tend to get the flu that much. When they do, it's very deadly. Like pneumonia, flu, both are very deadly for seniors.
Right.
No, I don't think. I'm just telling you, I don't agree. I don't think you're not going to see 2 million people dead here. And if it were, it's still only 2% of people that actually contract it.
Only 2%. Listen to what you're saying. Only 2%. Each of these people is a life, a family.
Most diseases. I'm not dismissing their life. I'm simply saying that 2% on a disease is pretty standard for a disease. If you're looking at like 10, 20%, 30%, wow, that's
yeah, but
right.
2% is real human beings, and 2 million Americans as 2 million real human beings. I'm really astonished that people dismiss these numbers like they're not real people. And we have expended extraordinary resources to keep people on influenza alive in these critical care weeks when they are most susceptible to dying of normal flu or normal colds or the things that are seasonal. We spend an extraordinary amount of our healthcare resources to keep those people alive. And then people say, 2%, that doesn't mean anything. 2% is potentially millions of people. Just here.
2% would be high, and I would be extremely shocked if you saw 2 million people die anywhere globally, let alone in America alone.
In the 1918 pandemic, between 50 and 100 million people died, and the number is squishy because there were no real records kept because the record keepers died.
Well, all right.
Sorry, Sean. Wasn't that? I'm just going to back up something you said earlier. Wasn't that just after the introduction of a different radio frequency? I heard there was some theory along those lines that with the
No. Sean made a very eloquent case, and I'm going to look into this because, again, correlation is not causation, but that's a very interesting variant in the environment. The point I'm talking about is trivializing numbers by saying, it's only 2%. That is so shockingly cynical.
you're saying this, but you're the one who started off with the statistics. We're having a conversation, and you went into statistics.
Yes, because the numbers are very, very bleak.
Okay, but then
I don't see that as bleak, though. I just don't see how 2% death, which is normal for any, whether it's flu or COVID or
it's
any
not
virus,
normal.
is not
Life
bleak.
here, Sean,
is
not normal. When you accept those numbers, you're accepting death as normal.
But first of all, you're assuming. Well, no, actually, I do accept death as normal. By the way, I do accept that death is absolutely a normal aspect of. There is no such thing as life in this world without death. Okay, we got to get past that false narrative that we've been living with, this illusion that everything is safe and fine, and we're in a world that's sanitized, and we push death aside. No, it exists. It's real. It's happening. It's inevitable. Whether it's from cancer or car accidents or getting hit by a coconut when you're walking down the street. It's just that's what life inevitably will result in. I don't believe you're going to see 2 million deaths from this, but even all I'm saying is, simply speaking, if this really was a pandemic that gets to every person on the planet, and you end up with, somewhere in that range, it's awful, yes, but at the same time, how many people died from cancer last year? I don't know. I mean, it's how many million? You tell me.
And again, look at all the resources we turn to try to keep people alive. If you're asking for a major societal change where we just say, okay, 2%, who cares? Georgia, maybe it's time to bring you in on this.
Well, by all means, but I just think that we're passing many points. Georgia, I'd love to hear from you, obviously, but just a comment. You're also saying that it's only from how do you define disease? I mean, how many people smoke? How many people drink more than a certain amount of alcohol? How many people are stuffing sugar down their throat every day? I've been shopping here in the States, and I'm just amazed how difficult it is to avoid sweet stuff in food. I mean, it's
stevia.
unbelievable.
You got to get the stevia. You have to get the stevia alternative. It's so difficult, right? Everything has sugar. Everything has processed sugar in it. You name it. I mean, it's garbage. Most of the food that we take into our bodies is garbage. We wonder why we're so sick. But this goes back to the slave system that I was talking about, which is unhuman. It's anti-human. It's not just about profit. I don't believe that. And when you're talking about the modification of the food, the modification of our lifestyle to be like herd animals, stock animals, it's Huxley time. It's love your servitude time. There's a darker force at work than just saying people are making money by selling us garbage. I don't think that. I think this is unhuman. There's a satanic force that really is treating us like this.
What is the unhuman agenda then?
What is the satanic agenda?
All right, you want to use
the satanic
term?
Agenda? No, satanic because why? Because it's killing us day by day, whether it's with the nature of how we how we work in office spaces that have no fresh oxygen, no natural sunlight, whether we're eating this garbage food that they're processing. That yes, there's life that does take over and basically start to go against it and say, hey, we want organic food. Why should you have to ask for organic food? Why shouldn't the food be organic in the first place? That's my point. Is it's satanic because it's destroying life as an experience. Going back to the issue of what is life that we as humans crave, and we are, and we've turned it into this synthetic artificial reality. Maybe it's an AI behind it. I don't know. Some people speculate there's an AI intelligence that's basically just replicating the virus.
Hang on. Remember, it was Hawking before he died, and it's Musk and a few others that are really looking at this, that we're all in some kind of bizarre simulation. That this isn't real at all. This is just some computer having, it's bored, so it wanted to inject something different into the matrix.
Yeah. Well, John Lennon put it the best. He said, if you look at the system, you realize that there's people that are just psychopaths that are running the world. And he's like, I don't understand how these people can exist. It's just not human. What's really behind this movement? I mean, does it really make sense? The idea of the amount of money, the obscene amount of money that corporations can make, that it motivates the desire to basically keep people blind, deaf, and dumb. To not, I just don't understand what, how can you say that's anything but satanic?
It's definitely time for Georgia.
Gee, thanks.
You're welcome.
Oh, gosh, you guys have been talking about so many different things. Where do I start?
It's a cornucopia. Pick anything.
Well, there you go. You know, some of us remember the 60s, and
yes, we do.
when the whole New Age movement took off and that kind of thing. And, yeah, there was a lot of fluff and glamour. But, you know, one of the things that was being talked about at that time is that we're going to enter a time where things are so confusing that we're not going to be able to figure it out with the intellect alone. And we are here. I mean, this is a time.
Oh, we're here. We sure are.
We have to question everything. I mean, I agree with a lot of what Sean has been saying. You know, our bodies are essentially electrical. You look at Eastern philosophy and they talk about the different layers of the subtle body and how that all works. And yes, it's affected. Can we adapt to it? Perhaps. Maybe that's part of the plan. We look at this virus thing and it seems very nefarious, but maybe it's some part of the process to strengthen our immune systems collectively as a species. You know, all of us that are living today in the West anyway are here because our ancestors survived the Black Plague, which took out a third of Europe. We're the genetic descendants of the survivors of that. So do things come along from time to time that bump us up to a more rarefied instrument in terms of our form nature? Sure. You know, you were talking about...
Well, hang on. Let me stop you there, because that's Chandra's model, Wickrama Singh. He thinks we're being inundated by life forms from the galaxy, that interstellar clouds are really composed of viruses and bacteria and spores, and they form in interstellar space. And he's got an incredibly interesting model. And that periodically when we have these pandemics, these global things that overwhelm humanity, they're really literally falling from the solar system as part of the natural influx of galactic material that the solar system has exchanged for billions of years. That's his natural background model. He's got data showing that we've got viruses and stuff from upstairs. The question I have is it really from the galaxy, or is it part of our unique solar system history, to which he and I have not had a chance to really talk yet?
Well, exactly. And this is one of the things that we have to question, because even if it is natural or nefarious, it still is having the effect of making us evolve, making us bump up our immune systems. Mm-hmm. And you asked a question about what is this pause that we're having globally? What is the opportunity here? And pause enables invocation.
I'll tell you what, hold it. We're at the bottom of the hour. Sean, can you hang with us so we get to the end of this thing and I can give you some proper closure?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Absolutely. I'm fascinated by what she's about to say.
George is worth listening to, I guarantee you.
Yes.
You are on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland. George Lambert is about to speak. Do not touch that dial. We shall return.
theothersideofmidnight.com. Tune in to listen to Richard C. Hogland and his fascinating guests. Support the broadcast and don't miss another groundbreaking conversation. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive member benefits. Listen to past episodes anytime on any device. Search the archives of over 180 episodes. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Talk radio at the cutting edge of science and thought. theothersideofmidnight.com.
And welcome back, everyone. Last half hour. If you want to call us, actually, we have a very packed show. But if you have something really important, I think Barbara Honegger has something she wants to share with us. And we'll get to that in the next half hour. In the meantime, we're going back to Georgia and her very important point.
You know, as I was saying before, I agree with a lot of what Sean is saying, as well as what Tim is saying, too. I think that humanity is on the verge of a big step forward in terms of spiritual evolution. And a lot of what we're seeing is the resistance to that, whether it be the psychopath that's running things or greed or just ignorant human demand. All of the above and more. These are the forces of matter that are resisting this change, that it just doesn't want to change. And this pause that we're experiencing enables us to create a vortex of invocation. You know, when people are frightened, they pray. You know, normally we don't listen to the higher life. It's said in meditation that, you know, prayer is asking God for stuff. Meditation is listening for the answer. These kinds of these kinds of pauses enable us to draw from what the Hindus call the rain cloud of knowable things, which at the beginning of each age is the wisdom that is to be unfolded within humanity for about a 2,500 year approximately period. We're in that window, and the new stuff is overshadowing humanity, and the old stuff is kicking up a fuss about it and is coming more to the surface than ever before. So it seems like things are getting worse. But this is the illusion, because what we see on the world stage is really our past manifesting. We don't see the incoming present because it hasn't taken shape yet. But these pauses give us a chance to give it shape, where humanity collectively, by whatever religion or belief they have, begins to invoke that which is higher by whatever name they give it. And this creates that movement in the field, as you might say, Richard, that allows that overshadowing wisdom or rain cloud of knowable things to descend, and it stimulates people's minds to invent new technologies, to find new solutions, and that's the opportunity of this time. But it is a time where we have to question everything, because we don't know the motives behind a lot of this stuff. We can speculate, and it might be even educated speculation, but until we develop collectively that discrimination, we're not going to absolutely know. In the meantime, we still have to deal with all of this. And dealing with it means that we invoke that higher life, the life we have. Because if what we've got right now could solve things, it would have been solved by now. We need something more. And these pauses give us a chance to invoke something more.
Sean?
Oh, that's what I've been trying to tell you.
Oh God, I
love
a know-it-all.
No, but it's what you're saying is elaborating on what I was trying to get at, which is to say this new earth it's here, it's ready, it's coming through life, which is in us, which is the human being and the spirit and consciousness of the human being. And now we have to breathe air, we have to breathe into the fire, that it's the embers of the fire that need to be that needs to burn. We have to breathe oxygen. We have to breathe air on it with our thoughts, with our words, with our intention, if we want to live in that future. Because we've passed 2012. 2012 was a 7-year incubation. People thought it was a joke or whatever. Oh, when did it happen? Well, guess what? The world just stopped. It was a necessary transition period we had to go through, so that we can, as each individual consciousness, essentially choose which reality do we want to inhabit. Which one do you want to enter into? Do you want to live in the old paradigm, in the collapsing old earth as the systems implode, and the logical outcome of that rehashed AI that basically can only cannibalize itself and eventually destroys itself? Do you want to live there in the ash, or do you want to live in the golden age, which is to come, which is now in our moment of realization that we can have it as soon as we accept that we are it?
Sounds very Taoist.
Well, you remember, Richard, the old story of the Native American story about the little boy visiting his grandfather, and as he approaches the teepee, there are two wolves fighting.
Oh, yes, the wolves.
And the little boy says, what are the wolves? And he says, those are my two futures. And the little boy says, which one will win? And the grandfather says, the one that I feed. And energy follows thought, right? So what future are we feeding?
But something is creating a world of panic and fear and loathing and fear porn around what's going on right now. And how do you get good stuff, guys, out of bad process? Because if someone has done this to basically kick us into the next, dimension, metaphorically and literally, it's going to kill all the elder wisdom. I mean, the Chinese revere ancestors and elderly because they are the keepers, the wisdom keepers of civilization. If we wind up getting rid of all them, or this process does, where does that leave us?
Well, I think that is the very point that's contributing to the fear, isn't it?
Yeah. Which is not unreasoned. Yes, John.
I would say that history had to end, because that was the only way to give birth to new stories. And as much as we like to say that there's this memory we've been holding on to, that's actually kept us in this trauma state for so long, that we've been traumatized humans for so long because we've been holding on so tightly to our memories, and we didn't remember that all you have to do is forget, so that you can actually be light. All you have to do is be light to the moment, because in the moment, it's like the Akashic field, the Akashic records, the Akashic knowing is available to you. At any moment, when you tap into the moment, the now, that is the only truth that exists, is in this moment. We have been living with the logic of this left brain thinking of recalling things and holding on to things that don't necessarily resonate with the moment of existence, which is now. So when in the moment of presence, the truth manifests here and now and gives birth to the future that we desire and design, not based on the memories and the pain of the past.
Okay, let me bring another voice on. Barbara Honegger has been a guest on the show many, many, many times. She was a member of the Reagan administration. She was the first female appointed to an important position in his administration, and she's kept her ear to the ground. She's worked very heavily on the whole 9/11 situation in New York. We've had her with her lawyer committees on, presenting us with the political breakthroughs and economic implications of that. opening of that can of worms. I believe Barbara has some new intel, and I'm going to bring her on now. Barbara, you're on the other side. Welcome.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me okay?
If I do this, you'll be on.
Okay.
Are you there?
Can you hear me, Richard?
We can hear you. Bye-bye.
Can you hear me now? I'm on a Verizon commercial.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, first off, I want to just say hi to Sean. He may not remember, but we met at Stanford University a few years ago when you, your dad, and your dad's co-author, you were there for an event in the evening on the book, The Secret History of the United States, and the film series. And I was sitting in the front row and asked the very... Go ahead.
No, I was saying, I do remember you, and I'm familiar with your work. I know your work, so I'm very happy to hear from you again.
Well, great. So the reason I've called in and requested, and I really appreciate a moment here, is to tell you a phenomenal experience that I had that completely supports something you said earlier in the show. I've been listening from the beginning. And that is when you were talking about the special relationship that Britain realized it had to form with the United States to survive as an empire, presumably being the second partner, not the lead partner, with World War I. Okay? Well, I had this incredible experience with Air Force Colonel Fletcher Prouty, who is the actual person, as you well know, but some of the listeners may not know, who was the actual person behind the character Mr. X, the military intelligence whistleblower in your dad's famous movie JFK. So this is the experience I had with him that blew my mind and taught me something critically important about who really is at the top of the power hierarchy in the United States. And this is what happened. What happened is I was working on my book on the First Side, on the real story of the Iran side of Iran-Contra, which was published in May of 1989. So after I had finished the research, I had a detailed reference chronology that was about 76 pages long. I sent it to the senior White House correspondent, my political godmother, Sarah McClendon. And after about a week, I got a call from her saying, "You've got to come to Washington, D.C." I was in California. I'd resigned from the White House by then, and for the Reagan administration. And she said, "You've got to come to D.C., Barbara. You've got to come to D.C." I said, "Why?" She said, "I can't tell you." I said, "Well, to see who?" She said, "I can't tell you. But he's very important. You must come." And so I had to ask my friend Danny Sheehan for a loan, the famous attorney Danny Sheehan. He gave me a loan. I flew back to Washington. Sarah picked me up at the airport, and we went to her house the next morning. I got up. I said, "Now, Sarah, I'm here now. You can tell me, what is this about?" She said, "All I can tell you is you're going to have lunch with this person at the National Press Club at noon." So I said, "Fine." I said, "Who is it?" She said, "I can't tell you." He wouldn't let me tell you. So we go to the National Press Club. No, I'm serious. So we get to the National Press Club with a senior White House correspondent, okay? And we get into the lobby on that floor, and I expect her to go with me. She's so famous, it's called the Sarah McClendon Dining Room. And she said, "Now, he will be waiting for you. I've made arrangements for the entire dining room to be empty except for him. He is waiting for you." I said, "Sarah, aren't you coming with me?" She said, "No, he wants to talk to you alone." So I go into the dining room. I can't believe what's happening. I go into the dining room, and I walk. It's kind of a long, narrow. He's at the last table on the wall. And I walk towards this man who is dressed in military whites with all of his ribbons. He has his cap off on the table. He stands up at attention as I walk towards him. He salutes, and he says, I believe that you're Barbara Honegger." And I said, "Yes, who are you?" He said, "I'm Fletcher Prouty, Lieutenant Colonel, Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Fletcher Prouty, retired." Now, here is this guy retired in his full dress whites with all of his ribbons. What's he doing in his uniform? So he comes around. I sit down. He does the chair for me. He sits down. He's all business. And he gets into his briefcase. He opens it up. He takes out a manila folder, takes out 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper about 30 pages thick, puts it down, face down in front of me, and said, "Turn that over." I turned it over, and he said, "What is that?" It was like a test. And I said, "Well, this is my chronology, my timeline that I sent to Sarah McClendon." And he said, "That's right." She made a copy and sent it to me. And then he looked me in the eyes, like you could tell he was an interrogator, a trained interrogator, intelligence interrogator. He looked me in, he said, "Look me in the eyes." I did. And he said, "Did you write this?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Did you write every word?" And I said, "Yes." And then there was a silence, and he just studied my face. And then he nodded, and he said, "Do you mind if I keep it?" And I said, "No." He put it back in his briefcase, put the briefcase down, and then clapped his hands on this little table in front of me. And he was still looking me in the eyes, and he said, "The people who," this is an exact quote, "the people who run the world go to Haley Berry Academy. If you'd like to join us, just let me know. Here's my card." Now, I realized I was being recruited for something. The question was what? Of course, I had no idea what that was, but I let it go. We had a pleasant conversation, then we had lunch. We talked about how we knew Sarah, and then we went back out after about an hour, and Sarah was waiting for us in the lounge. She's the senior White House correspondent that this whole dining room's still named after to this day. And then they pleasantries, and he leaves. And I said, "Sarah, what in God's name was all that about?" And she said, "He is so impressed with what you have figured out from open intelligence sources, from the newspapers, that he told me that it was very important, something he was going to ask you." I didn't tell her what he asked me. But now here's the rub. Here's the punchline. It was I didn't follow that up, because I'm not an insider. I'll never join anything. I think two's a crowd. Okay? Years later, 4 years ago at Thanksgiving, I had Dr. Peter Reynolds, an anthropologist, a professor, at my home with his wife for Thanksgiving. And we were talking about, as you do around the table on an extended weekend, what are some of the most interesting experiences of your life? We were sharing them. I shared this experience. And the moment the name Haley Berry came out of my mouth, I had no idea what it was. I never even looked it up, because I don't join things. And Peter, Dr. Reynolds, said to me, "What did you say?" And I said, "Haley Berry." And he said, "Don't you know what Haley Berry is?" And I said, "No." And he said, "My God, you are being recruited to the academy that trains the leaders of the British Empire when they go abroad. For instance, the people who ran India." And what that taught me is that from Fletcher Prouty's, what that taught me is Fletcher Prouty's, believe it or not, his primary loyalty was to the British Empire. It was not to the United States, even though he was an amazing whistleblower on JFK. And what he taught me in that moment, when I learned what Haley Berry was, this is my informed inference, that the people who really run the show, the people who did the Rhodes Scholarship and all of that, these people think of and run the United States from behind the scenes as a colony of the British Empire, not the other way around. That's the message I wanted to get out to you.
Fascinating.
Well, I've heard that. You're saying that Prouty was trained, though, at Haley Berry? That he went there?
No. Well, he didn't tell me that. That was an implication. Now, what's fascinating is if you go to Haley Berry, it's still an academy, but on the surface, as I recall, I went there, we went there that Thanksgiving 4 years ago. We looked it up immediately, of course, after he said this. Sure enough, still exists, but it presents itself with its public face as being something like Eton, the trains young people. But I was 35 years old when he said that to me. So there's another Haley Berry.
Guys, I have a question.
That's it.
Well, don't leave, Barbara, okay? Because I have a question I want both of you to answer. When the president a few days ago closed off air travel between us and Europe, the one thing that stuck out to me, and although I didn't know the specifics, Barbara or Sean, about the being able to prove these relationships, the fact that the UK was accepted from the order forbidding certain European countries from coming here, I thought was extraordinarily important. Nobody really answered why. And then ultimately he was forced to kind of recant and put Britain and the UK with the rest of the folks that can't get here anymore for a while. But I thought that exception was saying something about that, quote, special relationship.
It's actually called an exceptional relationship for that exception. Yeah. The question is, which is the dog and which is the tail? And what I learned, that at least as of, and that would have been about 1988. That would have been the summer of 1988, just before the election that George Bush Sr. versus Dukakis. And it's as late as that period of time, I believe that what I was being told was that Fletcher Prouty was a servant of the British Empire, and that the British Empire sees the United States as its colony.
Well, that's fascinating. Okay, Sean, we've got just a few minutes to about. Thank you so much, Barbara. We have a lot of people waiting on the line. I want to tell all those people we're going to do this again. We'll bring you on. You'll just call back. I'm sorry I can't get to everyone, including Robert. I see Robert there. But I want to give Sean, I want to give you time to kind of set an appropriate stage for the next part of our conversation.
What's the next part of our conversation?
Well, we know we have to go to outer space for that, but let's stay on the planet for the time being, okay? What do you want to leave people with tonight?
Oh, I feel like I've said it all. I'm exhausted. I want to leave it to some others to chime in too before we strike midnight.
Okay.
Reach the other side.
Tim?
You'd like to hear some more?
Actually, we only got 2 or 3 minutes till the end of the show. It's amazing how fast 3 hours goes. You're stuck primarily in Florida until when?
Who knows? Absolutely, who knows? It could be 30 days. It could be less. It could be 14 days. But I think 30-day ban was from last Monday. So I guess I have 3 weeks minimum before I can move anywhere. But one of the things I wanted to say very quickly, I know I'm challenging time, but talking with one of my contacts in Sweden. Sweden is a smaller population and quite a well-off population as well, I'd say. But mandatory vaccination against the coronavirus is something which has been talked about already. And who knows if that vaccine actually exists or not yet. Apparently it doesn't. But steps were being made in terms of discussing legislation or steps to make legislation in Sweden this week. And my contact, who is a national there, said, and also somebody who's knowledgeable about medical issues. Again, I'm being quite random about this, but I'm talking very specifically about somebody, and I don't want to disclose who it is. But they said that that'd be the last thing they're going to allow into their body, especially seeing as it's being rushed so quickly. So,
is this vaccine, right?
Yes.
Except, let me interrupt, Tim. I don't think it's rushed, I think it already exists. I think the president and the vice president already had it. I think the fact that both of them have been known to be, among carriers and people who tested positive and all that, and they don't have it, tells me there is a vaccine.
So who's going to be the hero that finds it? That will be interesting to see.
Exactly.
I think one more correlation as well. Why is Italy being badly hit? What is different about Italy than many other countries? One word beginning with V, possibly the Vatican. And that's a little foundation for the next show.
Oh, my God. Talk about a teaser. Georgia, you're up.
I would say question everything and use whatever internal discipline or methodology that's right for you to invoke the truth because the old saying is still very true. The truth will make us free.
Barbara?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, Richard. Okay, I have just this little tidbit. And that is, what if, I want to remind people, when the stock market falls too far too fast, they have what's called a circuit breaker, right? Stops trading temporarily. What if the world right now has been intentionally engineered into a global circuit breaker? And that right now we are in a massive experiment. These people do experiments on human beings all the time.
All the
against
time.
their will and without their knowledge. What if right now we are in a massive experiment to test whether drastically reducing fossil fuel use by airplanes, which are hardly flying, by cars, which are hardly on the roads, has an immediate effect, positive effect on global climate change? And if so, how?
Well, we can hang on. We can see the real data. The satellite images over China, which unfortunately are coming back with SO2, satellite images and spectral measurements over northern Italy. We know this is having an incredibly positive effect on the environment because of the truncation of hydrocarbon usage. So that's an intriguing idea, Barbara. Very intriguing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I think that might be what is happening for a very positive motive, believe it or not.
Wow. Sean, thoughts?
I like that. Like I said, I look at the positive aspects of this consciousness shift when things come to a pause, when we don't go through our ordinary rat race modality of survival, animal programming that we've been entrained with for so long. It's time for us to realize again what matters in life, and to realize it's life itself that matters, and we are here as living beings to create the future that we wish to inhabit.
One of the things that has occurred to me is if, and you and I talked about this earlier in the show, if mega corporations suddenly realize it's much more cost effective to have all these information agents, better known as workers, who are just shuffling electrons and information around, if they do it all from home and we save quintillion, gallons of gas on the roads, that in itself could be a startlingly positive development in terms of the global environment.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, dear. That's our friendly AI. It's telling us, Sean, that we've reached the end of the show. You've got 30 seconds to say something pithy.
I'm worn out. 3 hours of this, man. How do you do this? Every week? Every night?
Yep. And for several years, I did it every day. So, well, I want to thank my guest this morning, Sean Oliver. Thank you, dear. Sean Stone, for contributing an extraordinarily interesting set of ideas to I guess you could say, a conversation which is not going to end anytime soon. I want to thank everyone who participated: Sean, Barbara, Cynthia, Keith, Tim, Georgia. Am I leaving anybody out? Until next week, same time, same channel. Notice I'm dropping the other term from that. We shall return with interesting surprises. And I'll give you a hint. Think Twilight Zone. So until then, third star on the left, straight on till morning. Good night, everyone.